Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and as the musical theme suggested there, we are kicking off today the championship opener, the season opener of Season 2 of the NXTGEN Racing GT3 Championship, and no other place than Daytona International Speedway, which many of you have heard that theme throughout the years. You've heard it on those arcade cabinets in the amusement parks, the Daytona machines. We are here at the circuit today for what is expected to be a fantastic pair of races to get a highly anticipated season underway. With a grid of almost 60 drivers, in fact I think we are going to hit the mass total of 60 drivers when all is said and done. You can imagine we have got some fast and frantic racing ahead, and at this circuit, much like we kicked off Season 1 at Daytona, we'll be doing it once again here today, and it is expected to be a thriller. Now, of course, before we get into all the details, what's the schedule for tonight? Well, as you can see there on screen, the race schedule in Greenwich Mean Time, or UTC, will be getting underway with qualifying in approximately 13.5 minutes time, and that'll be a 15-minute session to determine the grid for the sprint race, which will immediately follow. That's a 15-minute sprint race, which will run all the way through without any strategic element. It's all about the fast-paced action and trying to get the best possible result through pace alone. And then after that, we'll be taking a brief break, but not without conducting some post-race winner interviews with each of our winners in the driver classes, and then we'll be back for the 60-minute feature race number 2, the strategic race of course, and we'll be back with that at approximately 5 to 9 tonight. In the commentary box, you have myself, Paul Walsh, and I'll be bringing you all the action. Of course, today we will be looking at the Apex Racing Academy lobby, so that is Lobby 1 this championship. Due to popular demand, we are running 2 lobbies, and I'll also be bringing you later this week, I'll be bringing you on Friday the 19th, all the action from the Coach Dave Academy Next Level Racing lobby. So that'll be Lobby 2, but more on that in a couple of days' time. For now, let's focus on the Apex Racing Academy, and, well, speaking of Apex Racing, it's only appropriate that we introduce our senior sponsor for this series. So who are Apex Racing Academy, or ARA in short? Well, Apex Racing Academy is not just a setup shop. They're dedicated to making you better at iRacing with services, access to drivers, and features not found on other driving schools and academies. Working with them will see you connecting with pros like never before. You can learn how to prepare for a race, build setups, improve lap times, and understand how to use telemetry tools such as VRS. And every week they host multiple sessions where members can join the coaches and take advantage of group coaching sessions. And in partnership with SDK Gaming, all the data provided will be automatically synced directly to your PC. There's no need to go hunting for setup, replay or ghost files. The data is right there when you turn the simulator on. Interested? Then why not sign up today at apexracingac.com. That website again, apexracingac.com. Now, of course, we are very grateful for Apex Racing Academy being alongside us, our senior sponsor for Lobby 1, providing us with a good number of prizes and also support in the setups that we're going to be running here over the course of the 12-round calendar. And well, we introduced the calendar multiple times in the pre-season test, and it's only appropriate we go from talking about Apex Racing Academy to talking about the drivers themselves, who of course will be competing for the ultimate prizes. So, we have 3 classes in this series. We have the Pro class, and of course you can see here a good number of drivers, 20 or so drivers here, and of course we have the number 1 door of Billy Fletcher, of course our championship winner in the Pro class in Season 1, and he is back looking to defend his title against a roster which sees a number of returnees from Season 1 and also some new names on the agenda. Returnees include the runner-up, Matt Caruana. You've also got the likes of Pimbo there. We've also got Kenny Heremans, Robert Dasunik, and Oystein Hereford. Meanwhile, newcomers to the series who will be looking to make their mark from the outset, James Holman, Callum Brandt. We've also got there Tom Dadswell and Mark Fletcher. So we have a mix of the old and a mix of the new, and Reese Carroll as well there, a driver who's been highly anticipated going into this season. Will he be able to cause some upsets early on? But it's not just about the pros, oh no, because we also have the Pro-Am class here, and these are the drivers who are in the middle ground. They're not quite at the pro level in terms of their iRatings, and it's all been decided based on their performance in the preseason tests and also their iRating as recorded on the iRacing simulator, which we're using to host this series on PC. But the Pro-Ams here in that middle ground, we've got a good number of returnees, and you can see a lot of names there, which are the call sign of Ignium Motorsport, of course, such as Paul King, Jakob Boshoff, and also Stephen Norman, just to name 3 of the many there. We've got 8 of those drivers, in fact. I believe we've also got some of them in the Pro class, such as Oystein Hereford. And you can also see a returnee there of Colin Martin, the number 147 car. But we've also got a huge number of newcomers in the Pro-Am class, such as Lucas Romano. We've also got their Daniel Homer, Phil McDougall, and we look a little bit further at Hakan Schott as well. And that means we do have some old and new intermixing, and Peter Lemkins. Let's not forget about Lemkins, who put in some good performances in the preseason test races. What will he be able to do now that the points are on the table? And lastly, our third class, the AM class drivers, without whom we would not have a wonderful set of battles for the drivers who do not quite have the skills or the pace, we could say, of the Pro-Ams and the Pros, but these drivers are still looking to make their mark and one day move into the Pro-Am or the Pro class. And we've got a number of returnees here, such as Matt Emmons, Alexander Batak. Batak, of course, being our reigning champion from Season 1, taking the championship win at Spa in the final round. We've got Navarro Debova as well returned. The Debova family are here. We do have Navarro, young Navarro, in the AM class, and we have his father, Jeremy Debova, in the Pro-Am class. We've got Kurt Van Hoenacker there as well. And that's just the first 4 names which we can call off the list, which are all returnees. But also, let's talk a little bit about some of the newcomers in the AM class. We can see there we've got Stefan Tim Koopmans. We've also got Gus Franken. And last but not least, there we've got Peters Kupiers in the number 217 car. And also in the 233, that'll be Peter Dombrecht. So a good number of names here. And also we do have our runner-up of George Bland from last season, returning in the AM class and looking to seal the championship this time around, losing out in the season finale. But we've introduced the drivers. We are going to have that grand total of approximately 60 drivers out on circuit. And what's the circuit they're going to be racing at today, I hear you say? Well, it is, of course, Daytona International Speedway Road Course, located at Daytona Beach, Florida, United States of America. And as you can see from the circuit diagram here, provided to us by simracingwiki.com, who we're forever grateful for providing us with these wonderful illustrations, it is a circuit consisting of 12 corners, which involves both the oval but also an in-course section or an in-road section, whereby you, in the arena, you have turns 2 through to 6, and you also have the chicane from turns 8 through to 11, which throws a mix of corners in. It's not just about the left turns here. We're not running an oval layout. It is the case that you have the arena section where we do have a couple of right-hand hairpins, predominantly turns 3 and 5, where there's going to be some major overtaking opportunities outside of slipstream and up on the oval, and that does mean that our drivers will be needing to be ready to battle on the brakes. And speaking of this circuit, let's give you a reference lap here, as brought to you by Billy Fletcher, our championship returnee from the Pro class, and he's taking us around in the Audi R8. So coming into turn 1 then, a heavy braking zone here, trail braking all the way into the extended apex and coming gently down to second gear and turning in nice and tight. We're powering down the throttle and charging through the turn 2 kink here, the right-left combination that is turn 2. A short run up towards turn 3 then, as he comes braking down into turn number 3. It is the case as he makes his way through the corner, he's able to get a nice amount of power on the exit and now build up the speed through the left-hander of turn 4. Flat out here through turn number 4, just balancing it nicely on the throttle and the steering wheel before coming down into turn 5. Braking hard here and coming all the way down to second gear. A long braking zone there for turn 5, but it means he can get on the power nice and early. Not as much run-off area this time from turn 5, so he has to be clever with the power. He can't abuse the edge of the circuit. Now coming into turn 6 here as we leave the arena and return to the oval, and you can see just how wide the exit is of turn 6 and how early Fletcher has gotten the power as he now makes his way up onto the banking of the left-hander of turn number 7 here. The long extended oval left-hander as he makes his way around and now starts to come down off the banking and onto the flat as they head towards what will be the chicane, and in this case it will be the double chicane of turns 8 through to 11. A left-right, right-left combination, and you'll see he'll be looking for his brake marker just after the 2-board, approximately 75 metres, and as he comes in here, maintain as much speed as possible as he aims to cut the apex curves high, and as he makes his way across a nice flowing run there from Fletcher as he now comes around onto the second left-hand bank at turn number 12, the final corner to complete the lap, and riding all the way along here, going all the way up to top speed. We're going to be seeing our drivers hit in excess of 170 miles an hour just on their own pace, and you can imagine the slipstream will be looking up to 180 plus miles an hour down the bank and in the run to the timeline. As Fletcher completes the lap there, a wonderful lap of course from Fletcher, and now let's come on to the rules. Without them, of course, we would not have civilization in racing, and it would be a little bit more difficult to police things. So the rules for tonight. Our drivers will be running the iRacing medium downforce setup. We are still staying with fixed setups over the course of this series, and we'll be running the medium downforce setups for tonight's races in both the sprint and the feature. In the sprint, each driver will have one fast repair available, and a driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 17 incident points. Those are instant points that are registered by iRacing automatically as part of the simulator. We thought we'd put this in to give you an idea. If drivers are driving erratically, they'll be accumulating those instant points, and over time they could be subject to drive-through penalties. In the feature race, we'll see that drivers' starting fuel loads are restricted to 70% for the start of the race, and this is to force a pit stop. There will be that mandatory pit stop where drivers will need to take on the fuel, but changing tyres is entirely optional. Of course, if you change tyres in the pits, you're going to spend more time in the pits, but you'll have the greater pace towards the end of the race on fresh rubber, and that is the trade-off, of course. And each driver will have one fast repair available in the feature, and a driver will be receiving a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 25 instant points or more there. So as a result, they need to keep it clean in both of the races and keep it cool. And of course, what with this being the season opener, you can expect that things may just get a little bit erratic for the purposes of just the opener. What with the fact that a lot of drivers will be highly anticipating this one. They'll be a bit of nerves down in the paddock, but also on top of that, it will be one of those situations where you can imagine drivers will not be used to racing amongst one another despite the pre-season test, particularly those drivers who weren't able to make the pre-season test, so they will need to be on their guard. But now, with only 3.5 minutes remaining before we go racing, it's only appropriate that we head back to the live cameras. And as we do look at those live cameras right now and remove the information away from the screen and present you with the final lap times in this practice session, we look around and we can see that it's Matt Caruana right now who holds the fastest lap in this final practice session with approximately 4 minutes to go here, 43.271. But the thing about qualifying here, as we said, or we alluded to briefly in the reference lap provided by Fletcher, around this circuit, it is going to be quite significantly about slipstream. And you can imagine a lot of drivers will try to set themselves up well in order to gain the toe of another driver as they're making their way around for their qualifying lap. But of course, then there comes that little strategic element from different drivers in terms of do they abort the lap and get off the lap. Of course, they're not allowed to impede when they abort a lap, otherwise they will be facing a word with our stewards. And I should point out, whilst this series is not live stewarded, we use the live stewarding or the instant point system from iRacing on the simulator. We do have post-race stewarding, which is run by NXTGEN Racing, a dedicated team of 4 to 5 individuals who will be reviewing the race footage based on our drivers' instant reports, much like with Formula 1, those post-race instant analysis that the FIA conducts, and a quite controversial one recently, of course, with the Formula 1 Grand Prix at Interlagos. I won't spoil that for those who haven't seen it yet. I have yet to watch it back, I just know what's happened, but it is the case that we will have the stewarding in place in order to remove any moments where we're expecting that a driver has driven unfairly. But Caruana topping the timesheets right now overall, the pro driver, we can see it is Paul King, the Pro-Am driver right now, who is topping the charts for the purposes of the Pro-Ams here in this final practice session. And we can see the Ignium Motorsport Spark driver here coming into the pits, and as I said earlier, we've got a good variety of the Ignium Motorsport drivers here today who are going to be racing. We've got 8 of them in total over the course of the season. I believe they are all in attendance today, which is fantastic to see. And meanwhile, in the AMs, as Fletcher sets at 43.2, going at 25 thousandths faster than Caruana for the purposes of this practice session. It shows you how tight it'll be. At the moment, it is Navarro de Bova, who we can see parked up here in the Audi R8, the McChange B2 driver, the AM, who is overall the fastest of our AM drivers currently, and we'll wait to see whether he can pull that off in qualifying. And we do have drivers in teams this season. I should point out, we did have in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you can see, for example, that Navarro, as he leaves the pits there, is listed as the McChange B2 driver. He races for that team, and it does mean that over the course of this season, our drivers are allowed to form teams of 3. So whilst this is a drivers' championship, you can imagine there's going to be that certain teamwork element. We may see some of that come to the fore today in qualifying in terms of certain drivers providing one another slipstream in qualifying, but they have to do so reasonably. And of course, any major impeding of drivers or intentional blocking to gain an advantage, that will be penalised. We're not going to be seeing any team tactics of that sort. Keep it fair and keep it clean is the motto that's been provided to everyone. Now, whilst we've got a bit of a breather here, we're just going to check in with you guys and girls in the chat. And I should point out, by the way, that tonight's broadcast is being brought to you on YouTube, also Facebook, and last but not least, Twitch. Now, in terms of if you want to tune in, or if you want to recommend it to your friends, it's NextGen Racing on YouTube. Alternatively, on Facebook groups, you're looking for NextGen Racing, and last but not least, you're looking for my personal Twitch, that is TX141 on Twitch, if you do want to tune in via the Twitch platform. But now, with only a minute to go, as we see Navarro there getting it a bit wrong, we jump the camera to Anthony Beck here in the BMW M4, the Ignium Motorsport Spark driver here, making his way around the number 7 car. And it should be pointed out, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, that with regard to our drivers tonight, and in terms of what we can expect to see from each of our individual drivers here and the choice of car. We are expecting the BMW M4s to be the favourite here because they have the high top end speed which really matters going around this circuit, particularly up on the banks. But again, the slipstream is going to be a major factor here, and that's why we're not seeing BMW M4s immediately right up there. As we can see, we've got Elliot Harper, for example, the Luxim 24 with MV Esports driver, the Pro driver who's teaming up with Fletcher, and also the AM driver of Matt Emmons. As you can see here, Harper running around with Fletcher just ahead of him right now, using him as a magnet effect here. I think trying to get a reference lap in here whilst they've got a little bit of time available. But as they make their way around for the time being, as this practice session now comes to its end, it is the case that we are looking to go qualifying very shortly. And who is going to be on pole? That is the big question that we need to find out as we do get the switch over now. And it will be the case that we are about to kick off qualifying. Now, as we go into this qualifying session, it's of course going to be a green circuit, and everybody will be looking to do their utmost here. As we can see, everybody already piling out of the pits, and our lead driver coming out of the pits is Christoph Kerekes here, the Delta Motorsport driver from the Pro category, the European, as he makes his way out the pit lane here. And we can see that in the chat we've got Gareth Mills saying that he's going to try and race tonight, and good luck to you, Gareth, in the YouTube chat. And I should point out Gareth Mills is racing in the CDA or Lobby 2, that's the Coach Dave Academy lobby, so you won't see him on circuit today, but you will get to see him on Friday. In the YouTube chat as well, we've got Def's Hourglass there, who is cheering on the Ignium gents tonight, and it's good to have you here, Def's Hourglass, and I think the Ignium boys will be very happy to hear that you are tuning in and cheering them on. We have also got, so I'm just trying to find one of the Ignium guys around on circuit right now. We've got so many drivers out on circuit, of course it can be a little bit of a challenge, you'll have to forgive me here, as we do find Stephen Norman making his way around right now in a rather colourful liveried Ferrari. That's a nice livery there, and some fantastic liveries up and down the paddock. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I once again have responsibility for deciding at the end of the season who has the best livery. And you can imagine here that everybody is running some fantastic liveries, and as a result, it's going to be quite difficult for me to pick. But I'll find my way for it, with George Bland taking that trophy last time out, of course, with that fantastic livery on the McLaren MP4 12C. But Bland is returning to the season, of course, in a different car. He decided to come with the Porsche 911 GT3, and we'll see a bit of Bland later on. We can also see in the chat there, we do have Katie Eames in the Facebook chat saying who's going to come out on top between Billy and Matt. Well, I think we could see a bit of an interdiction there, Katie. You never know who could be on pole. As we've also got here the returnee of Matthew Addy, who will be racing in the AM class in the Ferrari 488. And we saw Addy really come to life in the second half of the season in Season 1. And I reckon if you wanted me to put a prediction on right now of one driver to watch out for, it is Matthew Addy, for the simple reason that if he can have a strong start this season, try saying that multiple times really quickly, a strong start to the season, it is one of those situations where I think for Addy, he could really go far in the AM League and potentially be a good chance at taking that AM Championship. But he needs to get that momentum early on. One of the things he struggled with in Season 1 in the AM Championship was momentum. He had it come at Silverstone, and after that, with a brilliant set of battles at Silverstone, which were looked upon very well by the racing community. But as we can see, those lap times now starting to come in. These are provisional laps, of course, because those are the early out laps. Those are not an indicator. As we see, it was Robert Dusunic in the end who has taken the front position in terms of the order going around the circuit to go into qualifying laps, as we do already have a car spun there into the wall. I believe that was Reece Carroll who's into the wall as he's jumped back to the pits immediately, but he was into the wall there at Turn 1. Turn 1, a very tricky corner, particularly for the mid-engine rear-wheel drive cars, given the fact that it is a very long trail braking zone and you need to balance the momentum of the car as that weight tries to come around. But Robert Dusunic right now making his way through the arena, coming up into Turn 5 in the number 4 car, the Pro driver here, and as he makes his way in, looking very smooth as he currently stands. And as we look into the chat once again here, we've also got NXTGEN Van Nieuwen there cheering on Ignium in the YouTube chat. Skogeland cheering on Bright Esports. We've all in the YouTube chat, we've got Pew cheering on Bright Esports. Bright for the win as well from Lagerstedt. We've also got I'm Youngie cheering on the Ignium boys in the Twitch chat. And we will wait to see now, as I have to look away from the chat, unfortunately, folks, to bring you all the racing. Well, I say unfortunately, no, fortunately, I get to look away and look at all this fantastic racing, all these cars going around the circuit. But now, as things start to really build up, it is the case that with approximately 12 minutes this qualifying session to go, we're going to start to see those times come on in. And speaking of George Bland, by the way, here is the George Bland machine, the M&V Esports driver here as he makes his way around. He's brought that similar livery from the McLaren, of course, to the Porsche 911 this time around, and I think it fits quite well, and he's definitely going to be getting quite a lot of eyes, and indeed some of the cameramen at the trackside when they're taking those photos will want to get some snaps of that car. As the lap times start to come in, and it is the Canadian who strikes first blood, that's Jason Landry, the Pro driver at Daytona in this season, running around here in the Delta Motorsport Motorsport machine, setting a 43.587. That is a good marker for an opening lap to get yourself right up there, because we saw in that practice session 43.2 was the best set by Fletcher, and Matt Caruana was not too far behind as Landry makes his way through what is turn 3 and up into 4, as he's got that traffic ahead of him right now, and he's going to try and of course use that traffic to get a double toe on the run up onto the curve of 7. But of course, with that traffic running through the arena, if he doesn't keep his distance from the guys in front, or he hasn't timed this right, this is going to really hurt him in the long situation, as we see Jeremy DeBova setting a really good reference time there in the Audi R8 in the Pro-Am qualifier there, what is effectively a 43.6 and well above the majorities. We've got a car wide there off circuit, and I do believe that was Peter Lemkins who's had a moment as he's just rejoined the circuit. And I think Peter Lemkins, in fact, it was the case. Yep, Peter Lemkins did go off and has just jumped to the pits and left the pits once again. But Jeremy DeBova doing well, and it is Matthew Addy who has set the provisional pole in the AM class right now on what is a 44.5, a little bit off of what we're seeing from the Pro-Am and the Pros here. But I do think Jeremy DeBova has had an absolutely phenomenal qualifying lap. And I think Addy, to be fair, with the fact he's got a 10th between himself and George Bland right now, is looking quite strong. But of course, we've got a long way to go in this qualifying session, still 10 minutes, so we'll have to wait and see. Looking a bit further down the order, drivers who've yet to set a lap time, we've got Tom R. Dadswell, who is a debutant here in the Porsche 911. And a rather fetching livery as well there as he makes his way around right now. And we've also got Hakon Grifstad, 2 pros who've yet to set lap time. And we're just going to stay with Dadswell briefly here as he makes his way on through. I should point out, by the way, that in terms of the number of drivers we do have here tonight, I think we have approximately 55 drivers as it currently stands. So there's going to be a lot of qualifying times. Of course, we can't bring you up every driver's time on that left-hand side board. If we did, we'd lose screen. Or alternatively, we'd have to have so many statistics up on the screen, you wouldn't be able to see the racing action here. But we will try and get everybody covered as we can. As we see here, Dadswell improves to what is a P12 position, a 144.6 overall, but he's immediately demoted to P13 by Callum Brandt, who is another debutant as well, and he's moved himself into P10. But it looks quite good for a starter from Dadswell, as we're seeing more times come in here. And Oystein Hereford making himself known now to the community, the Norwegian driver here, but he's got a little bit of a problem, the Ignium Motorsport driver, racing for Ignium Motorsport rather than Full Send Racing this season, as he makes his way through turn 2 here, and that is he has got a BMW very close behind him right now and hugging the rear end of his car here as they make their way through it. And I believe that is the Delta Motorsport BMW, unless I'm very much mistaken. Now, who is the Delta Motorsport driver there? I'm just having to go back through my notes. It's not Mark Fletcher, I can definitely tell you that right now, but we can see multiple BMWs going around on circuits. We do see Fletcher in his own BMW charging around through the exit of turn 6 and up into 7. And as he makes his way around, it does look as though our provisional pole now has dropped to a 143.3, and that is Tom Edmonds here in the Lamborghini Huracan, who has raised the bar there by almost 3 tenths over Landry. But we still have the best part of half this qualifying session to go. So you can see there, Edmonds having to find a way to get out of the way of everybody coming charging through the arena. And you can see on that circuit map right now in the top right corner of your screen how we do have that cluster or that chain of cars effectively going around through turn 7 right now and going all the way back to turn 5, where they're all trying to get the toe off of one another and getting those distant toes which build up onto the curve, so that way they get the slipstream where they really want it, which is on the run through 7 up to 12, and that is what our drivers are doing. That's why you're seeing drivers sometimes pull off of a lap, because they're trying to get into the sequence to get some slipstream over the course of the lap here. Imagine Formula 1 at Monza effective. We've got that similar effective where nobody really wants to be the lead car, or if they do, they've got to have that confidence, so they just do not want to qualify with slipstream here. As we see Enio Baba deciding to lead a small pack round here in what is provisional P7 right now, and his best lap in this session has been a 43.91. That's quite an effective lap for the Porsche 911 as he makes his way out of turn 3 right now as he comes charging up towards 4 here. But you can see behind us Hakon Grifstad in the McLaren MP4 goes provisional P6 with 43.7. Is the case right now. Baba is helping out while the Lamborghini's behind him as he makes his way on through here, but as he does so, it's okay for the time being. It looks as though it could be the case that Lamborghini is just close enough not to trip over the back of Baba here, and really is going to benefit is the number 32 driver there, and that is Kenny Heremans, who has switched to the Huracan for the purposes of this season as he makes his way around here through the bank into turn number 7. He's getting a wonderful toe of the driver ahead of Baba right now, and this could really help him as we see him make his way on through. And in terms of the lap at this current point in time, as he makes his way down towards the chicane right now, I can tell you that in terms of sector times, he hasn't really improved on this one. I think this may in fact actually be an outlap by the looks of things on our screen, unless our screen is glitched of course. But as he comes through the chicane right now, he switched places with Baba here, and perhaps in the end he's going to be giving the toe to Baba, although Baba has had a very poor run through the chicane by comparison. He's actually dropped back quite a bit there, as we've yet to see any major improvement from anybody in that top 20 or anybody suddenly send a shockwave. But it really is the case that Tom Edmonds right now in a world of his own as well. I say somebody sends a shockwave, and they do indeed. That's Callum Regarton, who moves up to P13 there, and he's only 1,000th off of Anders Ankersen in P12 right now. The Pro-Am driver here of Garton debuting today, of course, and doing a very good job there in the BMW M4 of setting a strong lap. And you can see just how close it is effectively from P2 all the way down to P30, if not onwards, on that timing sheet right now. And it is the case that Tom Edmonds just seems to be in a bit of a world of his own with that qualifying lap, as we continue to watch Garton here making his way through 4 and up into 5. Now, I did have the opportunity in the build-up to tonight to have a chat to some of the drivers as they were getting into their cars, or just whilst they were down in the pit lane, and I had the first opportunity to catch up with one Paul King. Now, where is Paul King, you ask? Well, he's currently in the pit lane here in the Audi R8, and when I was asking Paul what his expectations were for tonight, or whether he's looking forward to racing at Daytona once again, he's saying he's looking forward to it, and no doubt it's going to be eventful, but that's all part of the fun, and indeed it is, as he just gets himself up on the jacks right now, and he changes tyres and puts a fresh pair on. But another driver I also had the chance to catch up with was Jean-Louis Deschamps, of course, our wonderful driver who has put in some stellar performances. The Belgian here, the Delta Motorsport driver, as he's making his way right now through turn number 12. He's currently a provisional P12 overall, and he's second in the Pro-Ams. And what Deschamps had to say to me in the build-up to tonight, as in fact he's listed here as he makes his way around, he was saying to me that tonight it's going to be one of those situations where it's going to be a challenging starting field with a lot of new but fast drivers. It's going to be an adjustment for everyone, since we cannot always 100% estimate the situation and how people react to certain actions. But slipstream is also going to play a major role at Daytona. That was the biggest thing he wanted to talk about, was the role of the slipstream here, as he made his way around the circuit in the pre-test sessions, and he was finding the slipstream was just so powerful, and it can easily save 0.6 to 0.8 seconds a lap. And in addition, he feels as though tonight's going to be an extra challenge for him on a personal level, because he's tested positive for COVID-19 and he's suffering from a stiff neck and some concentration weakness. Other than that, there's nothing to worry about, and I think he said that with a little bit of sarcasm in his voice in terms of nothing to worry about, but he's fighting on despite the illness, and that's great to hear. Of course, we do not have social restrictions in place because this is all a virtual event, thankfully, and as a result, we've got Deschamps here, and we have had a number of drivers who have tested positive for COVID-19 in the past, potentially. Alternatively, just not been feeling too well, not necessarily going in tonight, but Deschamps is the one who was confirmed, or at least he mentioned to me in the build-up tonight, but he's racing, and of course he'll be racing with that indomitable spirit that he did show in Season 1. A couple of other drivers I've had the chance to catch up to, well, catch up with, I should say, not catch up to. These guys are way too quick for me to catch up to. Reese Carroll here, who you can see just switching places with Deschamps, as Deschamps comes off of a lap there and drops off onto the yellow line. We can see Reese Carroll here. Oh, goodness me, and a bit of a situation there for Reese Carroll. I don't think he's going to be too happy with Bland cutting back onto the line there, but that's one of the unfortunate things as he jumps back to the pits here. But what Reese Carroll was saying to me, the drop-dead racing driver, is that he's expected tonight to be fun, and with the top pro guys being very fast, it'll be cool to see how the race shapes out. He, of course, is in the pro category as well. He showed a huge amount of pace in the pre-season test and great spirit as well, so that's why he's up in the pro class, and he's expecting this to be a unique experience, because this is the first kind of real race in a GT3, so it'll be fun to learn the cars through the season. Indeed, picking the Lamborghini Huracan, he has picked a car that is going to require a lot of concentration and effort. And speaking of effort, Matt Caruana has just gone fastest of anyone with a 43.095 there, as he now settles the car down coming through turn number 2 in the Lamborghini Huracan. And it is the case for Caruana right now. He's put down a marker here, and I think that's going to be a hard one to respond to, given the fact the fastest we saw in the practice session prior to this qualifying was a 43.2 between Caruana and Fletcher, and now it's the case he's gone almost 2 tenths faster than that, and you can see the closest lap time, Tom Edmonds, is 2 tenths down him. So I think Caruana has nailed it in terms of the challenge of being fast in the arena under his own pace, and then having the slipstream around the lap. And I wonder if Caruana's now going to try and target a 42. We haven't heard of any 42s being achieved, even in the practice sessions that occurred yesterday. Nobody hit a 42. There were a lot of 43s, but no 42s. Will Caruana be able to show us what 42 looks like? We'll have to wait and see, with 2 minutes of the qualifying session to go. And as we look further around, we have also got Jason Landry here, as we see Caruana coming off of the bank in there, and we have got parts behind, and that's Reese Carroll just waiting for an opportunity, and I think he's going to try and use Caruana as a tow magnet there in order to gain some speed, or use him as a reference lap. But Jason Landry, meanwhile, the Canadian driver, when I had the chance to speak to him, he's saying he was super excited for the start of the season. The Ferrari's a bit weak around Daytona in his opinion, the Ferrari 488 Evo, of course, but he'll try his best, and reverse grids mean anything can happen. He loves fighting through traffic. Now, some of you may be wondering, what do we mean by reverse grids? Well, it is the case that we are going to be doing a full reverse grid for the feature race. So you can imagine the results of the sprint race will determine the grid for the feature race, and there will be no driver class segregation, so we're not going to see the pros start up the front, then the pro-ams, and then the ams. No, we decided to go with the same format as in Season 1, which is we have the fully intermixed grid. However, there is one change, which is if a driver does not complete the sprint race, they will not automatically be promoted to the front for the feature race. If a driver was to retire, and only one driver retired from the sprint race, they'll be starting right at the back for the feature race, as I'm to understand it. And that is, of course, just a change on the rule there, so that way drivers cannot intentionally retire the car in order to give themselves the best possible advantage to start right up the front for the feature race. Not that we're saying any driver would do that, but it's just to change the rules in order to prevent that going forward. We also had Lamet Wedder briefly say, and I believe Lamet is out on circuit right now, unless I'm very much mistaken, or it's going to be very hard to find him at the moment. I can't quite see him out on circuit. I think he may have come into the pits, Wedder, as we will just try to find him shortly for you folks. But Lamet was saying to me as well that he's looking forward tonight. Excited to start the season, track feels good, and hopes his pace is good enough. Well, if I can find Wedder, I'll definitely show you him and his wonderful Livy, the Team Netherlands racing driver. But right now, as all our drivers continue to make their way around, we've got Matt Emmons here all the way down in P39 overall right now. It's P6 in the AM class, as this qualifying session is coming to its end, and a lot of drivers, it would seem, really having difficulty in nailing their laps over the course of tonight. I think Lamet Wedder may actually be in what is the Coach Dave Academy lobby, unless I'm very much mistaken. We see Evans parking up there and deciding to jump to the pits, but meanwhile we've got Neil Butler here from Full Send Racing, who is on his final qualifying lap right now. The fastest lap still being that 43.095 as set by Carana. Meanwhile, I can tell you in the Pro-Am right now, Jeremy DeBoer, who's gone to the pits, is still our provisional pole sitter there on a 43.7, and his son Navarro has set a 44.0 for the purposes of what is the AM qualifier. But I believe Navarro DeBoer may have had some technical issues, so he's not currently in the lobby, so I wonder if he's going to come back in time, as we see Oystein Hereford improves to a 43.293, getting himself onto the front row at the 11th hour here, and as a result now that delta to Carana's lap is 0.2 seconds, but it's not going to be enough, as Billy Fletcher only has achieved a P8 overall. He'll be starting on the 4th row at best, but meanwhile as more laps are coming in, I can tell you that it's the majority of the pros who are still making their way around on circuit right now, and including the pros here, we've got Robert Sunik, who's all the way down in P35. He's had a very difficult qualifying session. It's not looking good for Sunik as it currently stands, as he makes his way around and heads down towards what is the end of the lap right now, as he's making his way to the banking up towards the start-finish line. And as he comes all the way around here, it does look as though it's not worked out for Sunik. Only a 44.7 in the end, and not the lap he wanted. So this qualifying session has definitely thrown a spanner in the works for a good number of drivers here, as we see Anders Ankersen here making his way around P19, the pro driver, and he's going to be intermixed with Jean-Louis Deschamps, who's just going to qualify ahead of him in P18 as it currently stands, unless Ankersen can find something special on this final lap. But I do believe he is coming to the end of this qualifying session right now, and might be just doing a cool-down lap, as we've got Daniel Blomqvist here, who I think has finished his qualifying session as well, and is just making his way round and to come into the pits. So that does mean, ladies and gentlemen, that it is Matt Carana who has taken pole position ahead of Oystein Hereford, and in the what will be the Pro-Am category, it'll be Jeremy DeBoer who's taken pole, and Navarro DeBoer in the AM category. So some surprises there, but Matt Carana starting off very strong in qualifying, and you do love to see the runner-up take the fight as we now wait to go racing in the 15-minute sprint race. And we can see here is the case that Hakan Gustav making his way into the pits, the Ignium Motorsport driver just peeling his way in right now as he comes in for what is the preparation for the sprint. But a lot to talk about, and particularly those qualifying laps and the delta between Carana and the rest of the field. And again, it may have just been the perfect lap in terms of that slipstream setup, but Carana knowing how to get the job done as we now get ready for the race. As we are waiting, we just clear our screen very briefly, ladies and gentlemen. We check in with you guys and girls in the chat, of course, and it's a case that we can see Dadswell there cheering on Altitude Esport for the win in the YouTube chat. Bright Esports cheering on the Bright Esports drivers here as well, as we now look to the grid, which is forming in preparation for the sprint race here. And well, as we try to make our, we try to get our camera around to that grid, I think it is the case that there we go. We have got our grid starting to form. So let's just bring you that grid, our top 6 rows. So starting on pole will be Matt Carana there from the United Kingdom on a 43.095, the best qualifying lap by a significant margin. He'll be joined on the front row by Oystein Hereford from Norway, followed by Tom Edmonds and Elliot Harper, 2 debutants making up the second row. Reese Carroll and Jason Landry on the third row. The Pro-Am of Jeremy DeBoer lining up on the fourth row in P7 pole position for the Pro-Am, and alongside him will be Billy Fletcher. Hakan Gustav and Tom Dadswell completing our 5th row, and our 6th row going to Ennio Baba and Christoph Kirikis, and that is our top 6 rows concluded did, and well, it is the case that there is a sizable gap between essentially Jeremy Debova and also Navarro Debova, who has rejoined us. I thought there were some technical issues, but they've been subsided. But Navarro Debova with a phenomenal qualifying session, putting him well beyond the reach of his Amperes. And it's Matthew Addy who is the second of his Amperes, all the way down in P26, as we can see that grid lining up here. And we do have a grid, as I said earlier, of 56 drivers here today, as they're all just forming up, looking all the way down the back right now to James Slates here, who is right towards the back in P52, as everybody is just readying up to go racing. And it does mean, of course, with the safety car start, we have the partial rolling start. We are going to be going racing, as it'll be Matt Caruana who takes us to the green and gets us underway. As the grid and now begins to leave their positions, we look towards the front here, and it is Caruana who takes us away as we jump to the blimp. And we can see that we do have the pace car pulling away, and Caruana having a slow getaway there, just deciding to take his time with pulling off the line, not doing anything overly aggressively as he's making his way out of the pits. And as he comes all the way through, it's the case that as he comes all the way up to turn number 12, he's now just going to be getting ready to go once again here as he makes his way around. And meanwhile, as we bring up the team information for our different drivers here, the Apex Tech Racing driver of Matt Caruana, he will be itching to get this one underway. He'll want to pull the trigger at the right time, of course, because it is a long run towards turn number 1, and he will need to get this right, because otherwise Oisin Hereford in the Audi could jump him into turn 1, and that's not something that Caruana will want. He'll want to get a good start and try to pull a couple of drivers away with him up the front of the field as he just makes his way around. As he comes out of what is turn number 12 here, we wait for the safety car to move out the way, and as he does so here, we can see it's going to be any moment now that Matt Caruana will set us off for the season opening race. And it's lights out, and away we go as we get the green there, and Caruana getting a good start by comparison with Hereford and Evans as they all make their way through. And as they come charging down towards turn 1 here, it does look as though he's got the jump. And meanwhile behind we've got Edmonds here who's clustering up with him, and Edmonds going nice and defensive and holding the position versus Wesley Hereford, who's really been caught napping here as they make their way through the corners. Now as they come charging down towards turn number 3, it does look as though they make their way down into the corner here. We do have what is, by the looks of things, Elliot Harper there trying to get the closing. As we do get some of the technical issues from earlier reappear, we will try and get rid of those very soon for you folks. But right now, as we go racing, we have had a bit of an incident further back, and we can see that Matt Caruana right now holding on to that lead position as he goes charging through turn number 4. But behind, meanwhile, as we are continuing to get some slight technical glitches, we'll continue to bring the race in here. It does look as though Jeremy Debova getting it very wrong there on the exit of turn number 5. And in fact, those technical issues really kicking up right now, folks. So we are just going to get those fixed. We will be right back. We've been blighted a little bit again, but we've got a quick troubleshoot in place. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Apologies for that. We thought we were going to potentially experience a slight issue in the sprint race today, but we've got the technical issue out of the way, and we've only lost about 3 minutes of the racing. But what I can tell you in terms of what's happened, Matt Caruana has made a brief breakaway at the front whilst we've been away, and now that we're back for good. And as you can see, Caruana, he's not made enough of a break to really lose the toe, but Rise Carroll, meanwhile, has found his way up into P2 as he has closed from quite a way back and built his way up. Tom Edmonds as well, currently in P3, as we still got half of this race to go. Meanwhile, further down, with Jeremy DeBova having that major moment coming out to turn 5 that we did briefly catch in the Pro-Am race at the moment. It is Callum Reid-Garton who is leading the Pro-Am by a significant margin here and chasing down Enio Bava right now, as we do have a change for a lead here. It's a battle going into turn 1 as they go on to lap number 5, and it is Carroll versus Caruana. Caruana on the inside, Carroll going round the outside here, under braking, and Caruana braking earlier there, I think, just to simply not fight this one too hard and cost each other time as they make their way out of turns 1 and 2 and now down towards turn number 3. And meanwhile, behind, it's Elliot Harper here who'll be looking to close up, the P4 driver here from Luxem 24, as he does try to close up and do everything he can to get into that fight. But meanwhile, further back, I can tell the leader of what is the AM class right now, Navarro DeBova, meanwhile, as he makes his way through what is turn number 3 here. Navarro doing everything he can, doing it right at this point in time as he makes his way out to 3 and heads up towards turns 4 and 5, and keeping it smart right now. Has not had any of the pitfalls of his father at the opening part of the race, and as a result, as he makes his way up into 5, just keeping it clean. The closest driver to him, of course, in the AM League right now is Kurt Van Hoenack, who's all the way down in P22, and we can see them change B2 drivers to the teammate of DeBova there, of course, and making his way through turn number 5 and tucked in behind Colin Martin. I should say that with regards to, meanwhile, the battle for the lead, once again, we are seeing as they make their way up onto the bank here. Reese Carroll versus Matt Caruana as they come down towards turn number 8. Once again, coming into the chicane here, they are nose to tail. But it looks though Caruana just trying to keep that pressure on, not doing anything too intense at this point, just trying to build a little bit of pressure as they make their way on towards turn number 12 in the meantime, and as they come charging along. I mean, we're going to see a potential position switch here, or will we? In fact, Caruana deciding, I should say, to stay behind, not opting to go up high and change places here, just staying right behind as he makes his way down towards turn number 1 here. And as he comes on through, I do think it's going to be a case that for Caruana, he's going to be vulnerable here to Edmonds, but it looks like Caruana, in fact, has decided, well, it is Edmonds who goes to the move, and as they make the way through the corner here, it's Edmonds who tries to go all the way round the outside here, the R&D Simsport driver, but he's not able to find it completely around. Caruana going defensive enough to hold on for the time being as they make the way now up towards turn number 3, and you can see behind our Elliot Harper really trying to get in on this as we've got the 4 Lamborghini drives. It does look as though it's a hurricane, blowing a hurricane right around. In fact, 4 of them as they make the way through 4 and up into 5, and as they come charged on through behind, we've got Ristad and Oystein Hereford just watching on. Hereford, of course, qualifying P2, but he's fallen down to P6 over the course of this race so far, but he's not out of this one yet, and I think he's focused more on just trying to stay in that position right now than do anything too inventive. But meanwhile, further down the order, I can tell you in P2 right now in the Pro-Am overall, in the Pro-Am League and overall P15, we've got Ed Lack here who's trying to close up to Garton. He's quite a way down. Garton is the best part of what is approximately 2 to 3 seconds up the road. You see Garton in the distance there, and we've got Lack just making his way up towards turn number 6 by comparison. And I think for Lack at this point, he's just got to think about playing it smart here, not doing anything too intense, and just staying with the points. It's going to be solid points. He'll be a P2 in the Pro-Am race, in the sprint race, as he makes his way round up onto the bank in the turn number 7 here, and if he can stay close enough right now, he will be able to gain something out of this. As meanwhile, Tom Mao is going to look to make the change here versus Garton. He's going to be on the inside into the chicane, and it looks like Garton not fighting this one. No, he's not fighting that driver in the class, instead opts to stay in behind, tuck him behind in the M4 and gain some additional acceleration with the slipstream ahead of him, and that will help him get up to the top speed, the venerable top speed of that BMW M4 as they come charging on through turn number 12, and you can see getting closer and closer once again. But I think Garton is going to pull out here just to try and bleed some of the speed off the car and then tuck back in, and he might even need to do a bit of lifting on the throttle there because he's getting so close. As meanwhile, back up front, oh goodness me, and Harper there, was there contact with Tom Edmonds? What happened? So this was only moments ago, and this is in the run down towards turn 1. And we're going to see here Edmonds holding position and Harper going for the move on the inside. There was contact, and Harper coming from a very long way back and knocking Edmonds. And I do think there might be a word to the should about that one afterwards, because Harper there going for a space which I think was going to close. And I think Harper is, in fact, he's lifted off there and given the place back. Well, great racing respect shown. I think Harper just getting a little bit too adventurous, but he's shown the sportsmanship by already dropping back behind Edmonds once again and essentially saying, look, if I'm going to get the place off, off of you. I'm going to do it fairly. I'm not going to do it unfairly, but of course it's cost both of them massively as they're now out of that hunt for the lead at this point in time, unless the leaders really start to squabble and take time off one another. But again, that's one thing to say. Another thing to see it happen here at Daytona is going to be something else. And we look a little bit further back and we can see the Danishman here of what is Ankerson looking for a potential move here versus Blomqvist. It's a battle for position. They're battling for P14 overall, but what is effectively P13 in their class. And as they make their way out of turn 6, they're going to be side by side here. And you'll see the Porsche has initially the acceleration versus the BMW, but now as they make their way through 7 down towards 8, you're going to see immediately that Blomqvist just simply tucks back in. I think he has to back out of it, thinking he's too close here as he starts to get the overspeed versus Ankerson, but he's going to be on the outside to inside line for the chicane. I think this could be very risky for Blomqvist right now to try and hold it around the outside. In fact, he goes deep, and as a result, Lack now has closed up considerably here, and Lack will want these guys to get a move on because only 2 places behind him is Navarro Debova right now, who after having that, well, it's the case, that's Navarro Debova, and well, I was going to say that's Jeremy Debova. In fact, 3 places behind him, he's got Paul King, my correction here, and Paul King is closing up very rapidly to Lack right now in the hunt for P2 in the Pro-Am as they make their way around once again and charge onto another lap, going on to lap number 8 as we've only got 2.5 minutes of the sprint race to go. Now, as these guys make their way around, I can tell you that Tom Mayle battling here with what is Garton. Oh, goodness me, and Martin Mayle just being sent there for a spin as I believe there was contact, and that contact being effectively a style of a pit manoeuvre. I don't think it was intentional, but Garton definitely getting involved there, and I think Mayle's race has gone from good to bad to disastrous, and he'll be looking to build this one back up over the course of the feature race. That was very unfortunate for Mayle, and I think Garton may have a little cloud hanging over his head right now as he comes out of this race and goes into the next one. As meanwhile, we look further down the order, and I can tell you outside the top 30 right now, all the way down in what is P39, we've got Alexander Patak here, who's had a very difficult qualifying session. P39 translated into P9 in the AM class right now, not really close to anyone, but Patak really having a struggle on this season open. But there was a major incident, there were multiple major incidents through turns 3 and 5, which we didn't get to see, which I think really shuffled the order, and I think Patak may have been involved in those. As meanwhile, going around then and coming towards the end of what will be lap number 8 and then heading on to lap number 9, which I think will just about be the final lap of this race. We've got Reese Carroll right now leading, and we have had it corrected that we will need to change his team. Now, it's not Drop Dead Racing, we'll correct that for the feature race. But as he makes his way through turn number 12 here and heads up towards the start finish line, you can see Caruana now getting very close as we ride on board the gearbox here of Carroll as he makes his way. In fact, he's got so much car in front of him that we actually have a glitched gearbox there. We won't be able to show you that right now because that's how close Caruana is. He's literally touching the back of him, and well, as they make their way down towards what is turn 1 once again, we in fact get the onboard here from Caruana instead. We ride on board with the roll bar here, and this just shows you the distance between the two of them right now as they're making their way through it. The Drive Dead Racing driver in front, and we will get that team name changed of course, versus the Apex Tech Racing driver as they make their way through turn 3, and as they emerge out the corner right now, it is the case that I think for Caruana, he will try to do everything he can to go for the move into what is turn 7 and into the chicane, or will he wait until after the chicane and do it in the sprint to the finish line? We'll have to wait and see, as this is the overall and the win of the pro race as they come through turn number 5, and as they emerge from the corner here, you can see both drivers getting very equal runs, albeit Caruana going slightly up onto the exit curve there, but that doesn't cost him any time. It just unsettles the car a little bit as he now makes his way into 6th. They've got a bit of traffic ahead of him here. That's Matthew Addy, but as they make their way out of the corner, it is the case that Caruana very close here, too close for comfort some could say, and I think he's in that situation right now where he's come too close too soon, and perhaps Carroll's just decided to play it a little bit safe here as we drop back to the exterior cameras right now. And you can of course do this if you have a poor run out the corner and get the driver behind you too close, as we see Hakon Grustad trying to get into the fight as well. Grustad's coming out of nowhere here as Caruana looks over, it is free wide, and there's contact between Grustad and what is Caruana, and that releases Reese Carroll to go around through the chicane, and that is going to seal the win, I think, because Caruana right now has just rejoined. Oystein Herford is up into P2, Hakon Grustad in P3, and my goodness, that was unexpected, but that has set the tempo somewhat with that instant just happening right at the end there. But as he makes his way out the final bank, it is going to be Reese Carroll who takes the win in the pro class and overall in the opening race of the Apex Racing Academy lobby here in Season 2. Behind him, Oystein Herford in P2, and then we can see it's Hakon Grustad who holds on to P3 just about. Tom Edmonds P4, Tom Dadswell in P5, then Matt Caruana P6, but he's not going to be happy about that one. Then it's going to be Elliot Harper P7, Jason Landry P8, Mark Fletcher P9, Ennio Baba P10, Callum Reed Garton winning the Pro-Am race there and coming home in P11 overall. Daniel Blomqvist and Anders Ankersen at P13. Tony Rashad P14. Ed Lack P2 in the Pro-Am and coming home P15 overall. Pill King in P3 for the Pro-Ams and P16 overall. Kenny Harriman's there in P17. Tom Mao P18 after that moment with Garton earlier on. And Navarro de Boba, whilst we didn't get to see him cross the line, took the win in the AM class. We started off this season with a win. A brilliant drive there from de Boba in a world of his own, it would seem. And the world talking about his AM colleagues, it's going to be Matt Emmons and also Kurt Van Hoornacker on the podium with him as this race is now complete. And my goodness, what an opener to have in terms of a number of incidents and some brave attempts at moves here. And indeed, I think it has set the tempo for what could be a very, very fiery feature race. But we will be back very shortly, ladies and gentlemen, with post-race interviews with our race winners. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, well, that was quite the sprint race, and well, right at the end we saw quite a bit of incidents which I think the stewards are going to need to take a look at. But with those incidents for a time after tonight, let's conduct our post-race interviews, our winners of the sprint race, and we're going to start off with Reese Carroll, who is our winner for what is the Pro category. Good evening, Reese, can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Reese, congratulations on taking the win in the opening sprint race of the season in the Pro class. How does it feel to have got to the top step already?
I don't really know, to be honest. I didn't really expect to win this race, but I'm glad I did. It was a very fun one, so very happy.
It was a good drive from yourself at the start. You seemed to qualify very well, getting yourself up towards the front and then just patiently waiting for those opportunities to come. Was the aim of the race just to try and finish in the top 5, or was the goal eventually to put that pressure on at the end for the podium and the chance of the win?
Yeah, top 5 was my goal. I think the win just sort of came as the race progressed. I saw the opportunities, I just made the moves.
Well, it definitely smart play from yourself, and just a little bit about the end there, where I think the doors opened up to you in terms of taking the win with Karana and Grifstad battling. Of course, you were already into the lead at that point. Just take us through from your perspective, what was going through your mind, being the leader and then seeing that happen on your left-hand side?
It was very strange. Just being in the lead, I'm thinking after the bust up, oh, how am I going to defend from Matt and P3 behind? But then, yeah, they get taken out, and I just think, well, that's the win, I guess.
Oh, indeed. And now looking ahead to the feature race, the first time you'll be starting right at the back of the field, of course, having to find your way through. Any thoughts on that and what you're targeting?
To be honest, I don't know. Anything can happen. Judging by the pre-races we've had, it's very hectic. So I think my aim is just to survive and aim for that top 5 again.
Well, we wish you the best of luck in the feature race, but until then, congratulations on the win, and we'll see how you get on in the feature.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so hearing there from Reese Carroll, our winner of the Pro class, and now let's have a conversation with Callum Reed-Garton. Just give us 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Callum, can you hear me?
I can, mate.
Callum, a brilliant opener to your season with the win in the Pro-Am class for the sprint race. How does it feel to have taken the top step?
Yeah, it's decent. It's a good race, to be fair. Quick 15-minute race. Lap 2, I think, was a bit... No, lap 1, sorry, was a bit crazy. Had to avoid a couple of shenanigans on track. Luckily, I managed to get off unscathed. But yeah, mainly just sat behind a pro driver and just got the draft, pretty much. That was my race.
Well, we definitely, whilst we didn't quite see all of the incidents, because there were so many incidents happening, I think the incidents transferred into our broadcast and brought the broadcast down briefly. We could see that what was Jeremy Debova had a major moment coming out to turn 5, and that seemed to be one of a number of incidents that occurred in the arena section on lap 1. Just take us through, because in qualifying, there was quite a delta between yourself and Debova for that pole position in the Pro-Am. What was going through your mind going into the race? Were you thinking, I can go for the win, or was it just targeting sort of the podium?
I don't really know, to be fair, because I can't really make out what... I don't know what class everybody's in, so and it doesn't tell you. So I'm just driving around and I'm like, okay, I think that was P16, I think it was, and I was like, okay, that's pretty decent. But in regards to the incident on lap 1, yeah, I think somebody got spun, and then obviously I just tried to avoid it as much as possible, but unfortunately somebody hit me in my rear. Hopefully they had a good race with that, not so much damage. But overall, pretty quiet race, to be fair, other than the little incident I had with, I think it was Tom. He was going into turn 1 and then into turn 2, and he turned into me, didn't leave me any room, and unfortunately he spun himself out. So, but yeah, pretty
Now,
quiet race.
well, with that incident, of course, and putting that behind yourself for the feature race, your thoughts, because you'll be starting quite far down the order for the feature.
I think mainly it's just going to be stay out of trouble, keep it nice and clean for a couple of laps, go at a steady pace, and then just pick up the spots as I can, pretty much.
Well, we look forward to seeing how you get on, but until then, congratulations on the win and good luck in the feature.
Thank you.
And hearing there from Callum Reed-Garton, who seemed happy with the result and quite surprised by the result to some extent, given the fact that the race was quite dramatic at the start. But speaking of dramatics, let's now jump over to Navarro Debova, who was able to pull off another win. Well, his first win of this season, but making it 2 wins, 1 in each season so far. Good evening, Navarro. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Navarro, congratulations on winning the opening sprint race of the season in the M class. How does it feel to take the sprint race win at Daytona?
I'm so happy with this win.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear. And really good qualifying session. Out qualified your AM drivers by a significant margin. Was that all the plan?
Yeah,
And now looking ahead to the feature race, you'll be starting quite far down the order. What's the plan for the feature?
slipstream.
I like it. A single tactic and a single word. Well, I wish you the best of luck in the feature race, and we look forward to seeing how you get on.
Thank you very much.
In from young Navarro there. Quite simple tactics, slipstream being the aim of the game in the feature race. Well, we will be right back, ladies and gentlemen, for the feature in approximately what will be 7 to 8 minutes. And whilst you're waiting, of course, don't go anywhere, don't go too far, because that race will be coming up. And once it gets underway, you won't want to miss it. We'll be right back. With a word from our sponsor there, we are back in the build-up then to race number 2 of the season opener at Daytona in the Apex Racing Academy lobby, sponsored of course there, and we did see the promo from Apex Racing Academy, and do check them out at apexracingac.com if you're interested today. But with only approximately 3 minutes to go before we do go racing for the second and final time for tonight, we can see all of our drivers frantically getting themselves out onto the circuit right now to get a little bit of final practice time. Of course, with it being a reverse grid race, it is going to be one of the biggest challenges on the calendar for the simple reason, well, any reverse grid race, but particularly here because you have that slipstream factor. As we heard in the eloquent, simplistic words of Navarro de Bova, slipstream is going to be the big factor, because you may have the fastest car, but when you've got an even, well, a car that's in your slipstream and it's in that air behind you, it's going to gain a good amount of time in the run out of the corners, particularly up onto the bank of turn 7 and turn 12. Put 2 and 2 together there, and the driver behind you could be gaining almost a second of a lap just by running in the air, or the punch that you're making through the air in front. But as we see more and more drivers take it to the circuit right now, with time continuing to count down here, and a lot of our drivers already out there and just putting in some final practice laps here. We're checking in with you guys and girls in the chat to see what you've got to say with regards to everything. And a lot of controversy by the looks of things with regards to the incidents that we did see, particularly the incident between Matt Caruana and Hakan Gustad, and I think that has calmed down from what I'm hearing down in the paddock. I think it's all forgiven, and it's just one of those things that has happened by incident, and it's likely to unhappen again. Just one of those things. I think also drivers being quite raw in terms of it being the season opener. It does happen every so often. I'll be fair, of course, a number of incidents with pros as well in my time racing on Sims, but we will now see what's going to happen in that feature, of course. And as we continue to look around the field right now, one driver who I think is going to be very keen, and we'll have to keep our eyes on, of course, will be Reese Carroll, as he tries to find his way through the pack, come charging on through and do everything he can in the Drive Data Racing machine, the DDR machine, as we're just waiting for his livery to load onto the car right now. But you can imagine he will try and do everything he can in order to scythe his way on through and pull off a fantastic result. But as he comes onto that timeline right now, I think it's also going to be a learning experience for him, what to expect in trying to cut his way through the AM and the Pro-Am drivers, and can he get himself into the top 10 of the Pro class come the end when he sees that checkered flag over the course of the hour. Now, to reiterate for the uninitiated in terms of what to expect over the course of this feature race, we have one mandatory pit stop. The race is an hour in length, and it will be another rolling start with a reverse grid, and any driver who finished 2 or more laps down in the sprint will be essentially starting right at the back of the grid for the purposes of the feature race. So that is the condition. It's not the case that a driver has just retired. They need to have finished 2 or more laps down. So full retirement would count as that, alternatively, or if they've just finished that far down on the pace right now, as we are just minutes away from going racing once again here. We see DDD Vlaming in particular just getting a little bit of a toe there over the back of Anders Ankersen as he's building up and just getting in a practice fast lap here as he makes his way around and down through turn number 7 there and into the chicane, or the bus stop as some of our drivers like to refer it to, as we see him make his way in under braking there. And just ahead, I believe that is Elliot Harper there in the not in the Ferrari, my goodness, in the Lamborghini Huracan, battling with one of our Porsche 911s there as he makes his way on through. And behind him, that is, I believe, Ankersen, as now we get ready to go racing. We get the switch over here, of course, and it is now time to start forming that grid in preparation for the feature. Now, with our grid forming here is the grid for you, ladies and gentlemen. As we just remove the logo out of the way briefly, we can see it is Arjan Bakker there who will be taking us away from pole position. The AM driver having a very difficult race in the sprint, so he will have that opportunity to start on pole, and alongside him will be James Slates, the RP Motorsports rookies driver there, having a major incident from what we could hear, a major incident which saw him pretty much bow out of the race in terms of being competitive for positions, but still finishing within the lead lap. We've also got Stefan Tim Koopmans and Peter Kupiers line up at the second row, Jaco Boshoff and Neil Butler on the 3rd row, Ronald Van Utrecht and Matthew Addy on the 4th row. Addy having a very difficult sprint race. Daniel Holmer and Arjen Krigel on the 5th row, and then forming our 6th row, our top 6 rows there, that's Alexander Batak and Ben Hicks. And Alexander Batak will look to try and turn this one around into a win to redeem some points from what has been a difficult start to his championship defence. But now, as the grid is formed, it is time for Arjen Bakker to take us away with the safety car, of course, taking us away from what is the run into the chicane, and all of our drivers now get ready to go racing once again here as they just gradually creep off the line and we look to what is the blimp cam. Now, I should point out to you, ladies and gentlemen, we won't quite see all 60 cars out of the circuit now due to some tweaks I've had to make to avoid the issue we did see in the sprint race, but you're still going to see plenty of cars out of the circuit. It may just be the case that some cars do disappear every so often in the background, but I'm sure you won't mind, and we will get a slight update on those technical issues as we go through the season, because we'll be upgrading the broadcasting hardware. But enough on that for the future. Let's now come back down to the low ground here, and we can see Arjen Bakker just getting ready to take us away as he makes his way up on the bank at turn 12, and we're now moments from the green. And there's the green, and we go on the green as we can see James Slates immediately going on the offensive here versus Arjen Bakker. Arjen Bakker being caught sleeping in the run off the start line there, and as our drivers make their way down into turn 1, once again it's the situation where Slates just simply getting that advantage as he makes his way through the corner, and I believe we will get that calm down on the screen very shortly, folks. It's just so many overtakes happening at once on the registration system, but you can see James Slates doing everything he needs to right now in order to make that early gain. Oh, goodness me, and that is Arjen Bakker going for a spin there as we can just, well, we're waiting for our picture to update right now. Apologies for this. And we will have to look at this once again. It will calm down once that initial set of overtakes has happened where drivers have gone wide off the corners, and we will get back to seeing the race on the screen. But James Slates right now holding on to that lead. He's got Stefan Tim Koopmans really trying to put that pressure on early on as they make their way out of turn 5 and up into 60. They come rip-roaring up through the corner. As I'm hearing, we have had Stephen Norman jump to the pits here, and as we see Slates just trying to hold on right now, it's Koopmans who's trying to close up to the back of him, but Koopmans in the end, in fact, has got into that lead. As what has happened to James Slates and all of this? Well, Slates has had a major error coming out of turn number 6, and as he goes up onto the bank here at turn 7, he's now got multiple cars trying to come through, and that's Alexander Batak trying to squeeze through as they make their way around here. But as they continue to make their way on through, we're still getting a lot of chops and changes on our data screen, and things are now stabilising. We will look at how we fix that going forward, but you can see behind it, that's Gus Franken in the Ferrari here on what is the, well, he's on the outside edge right now, and he's going to go defensive versus Holman, and Slates goes wide once. Well, it's not Slates who goes wide, that's Alexander Batak who's gone wide. He's had a major moment, and now he recovers the car here, but Alexander Batak having a nightmare as we're seeing Billy Fletcher. Meanwhile, well, it looks as though Fletcher going very slow as well. A lot of drivers had major incidents on this opening lap as we see Fletcher just trying to hold on for the time being down in P14, but after one lap it's Jaco Boshoff and Stephen Koopmans who are battling into turn number 1 here as the camera tries to catch up, and I do apologise for this. We are just waiting for things to calm down right now, our data. But we can see as they make their way on through, it's the case. Well, it's Boshoff leading at this point in time as they make their way down into turn number 3, and Boshoff getting the move done. But meanwhile, Koopmans just simply staying away here and letting Boshoff go 9. They're not battling within the same class as they make their way down towards turn number 5. And meanwhile, a little bit further down the order, we can see we've got Anthony Beck here in P4. He's currently P3 in the Pro-Am class. He's chasing after Ben Hicks as they make their way around through the corners here. And Beck just simply trying to get a move on as he charges down towards turn number 5, and as he comes on through the corners here, and everything does settle down a little bit now after the opening battles. We can see it's the case that James Slates, meanwhile, down in that P9 position here, in a difficult position, chasing after Kenny Heremans right now. And Heremans having a very strong start here in the Pro category in terms of being able to hold position here as he emerges from turn number 6. The RP Motorsports Experts driver here, keeping his head down and getting on with business as he charges around. We've got a lot of drivers in the pits, I should point out, with those major incidents that did occur at the start. And as he makes his way through turn number 7 and down into 8 and 9, it is the case that he's going to be in a little bit of a no man's land. As further back, I'm hearing that George Bland going for the move here along the inside of James Slates, and Slates having that difficult start on those incidents as well, particularly the loss of the car coming out of turn number 6. And meanwhile, further behind, we've got Dirt Bouts here, who's also made the pass, and he's up into P11 overall. That is effectively P6 in the Pro-Am category, as he's battling with Paul King there, and King just tucking in behind and waiting for that opportunity as they make their way up onto turn 12. And you can see King already trying to go up onto the bank in here to look for that potential overtake, but he's not able to find it for the time being. As you can see, meanwhile, going in low there, that is going to be, I believe, that's Tony Verschaft trying to cut down on the low ground here and overtaking below the yellow line there. Now we'll have to wait and see where he's able to make this work as they make their way charging down towards turn number 1 once again. And Verschaft does make it count. He gets the move done there. Brave stuff from Tony Verschaft, and he's nailed it into P number 10 as he makes his way through. And we can see the concertina effect of cars coming out of the pits now as Verschaft holds ground for the time being. Meanwhile, further up the road here, as things settle down, it's Jakob Boschhoff who's holding on for the time being, but Koopmans is trying to close up as much as he possibly can here, but Koopmans not able to do so, and that gap is open up between these guys as they now make their way down towards turn number 6. Meanwhile, that, boy, goodness me, we've got Gus Franken off the road here, and he's jumped to the pit. So Franken having a disaster moment there, and he's had to come into the pits as we see George Bland making his way up into turn 6 once again here as he makes his way through the turn 6 corner and heads up onto turn 7. Bland soldiering on and trying to chase down Kregel and Koopmans, and Bland with a great opportunity here to turn around a difficult sprint race and turn it into something positive. As meanwhile, a bit further down the order, I can tell you in P24 right now, we've got Tom Dadswell who's chasing after Hack and Shot. And of course, they're in different classes, these two, with Shot being in what is the Pro class, where meanwhile Dadswell in the Pro class as he's just trying to close up. He's got some damage on the front of that Porsche though, and that may be preventing him from getting the aerodynamics that he needs in order to be able to draft his way all the way out to the back of the BMW driver in front. And you can definitely see how he's struggling even in the slipstream to be able to close up rapidly, although he's going to try and look for the move here into the chicane. Will he be able to find his way through? That's another question entirely as he makes his way under braking. No such success so far, as meanwhile, I'm talking about success further up the road. It is the case that Kenny Herriman's here looking to go around the outside of Arjen Kregel into turn 1. He's going to be up high here, and I think Kregel's going to back out of this one on the inside under braking. So they're not in the same class as No Need for Inch Battle, and you see Kregel does so immediately as they make their way into turn 1 here. Meanwhile, further down the road, once again, we've got Enio Baba here, who's going around the outside of what is Dirt Bouts here. The pro driver, the RP Motorsports Experts driver, going around the outside, but he's gone a bit deep into 1, and Bouts is going to look for this potential comeback here, but he can't quite find it as they make their way through 2 and up into 3, and as they come roaring into turn 3, now you can see how Bouts trying to hold that outside line here, but no such way through for the time being, as they now emerge and go up towards turn number 5 once more. They come roaring out the corner, of course, and now make their way up towards what is turn 5, and as they do so here, you can see Bava just holding ground, holding firm for the time being, as a bit further down the order and looking well down. We can see down in P36 right now, and really trying to make something out of this in terms of charge up through the field. Jean-Louis Deschamps here, who, having started and the best part of 13 places higher than this, the Pro driver trying to go to town versus DDD Vlaming as they make their way here down in towards turn number 1 here, going on to what is their 4th tour of the circuit. He can't quite find a way as Vlaming goes defensive, but you can see how by going defensive he's led himself to go deep into the corner, and Deschamps not close enough to go for the move this time, but he's definitely sized up as the Delta Motorsport driver, as Vlaming just holds his position for the time being. The McChallenge B1 driver for going a bit deep once again there into turn number 3, and really feeling the pressure right now. As you see the difference between the Porsche and the Audi, with the Porsche having that better acceleration, that better traction out the corner, whereas the Audi seems to come alive more through the medium speed corners rather than the slow speed hairpins as they make their way in front. And these guys just coming through what is right now the arena, as we have had a couple of retirements in this race already. In fact, we've had I think 1 retirement so far, although I think that is Gus Franken, who's actually just returned to the circuit, so we have not lost anybody so far. We've still got all of our starting field of what is 55 drivers, as we do see DDD Vlaming here just making his way now up onto that banking once again. Jean-Louis Deschamps not close enough for the time being, as meanwhile up front I can tell you that it's still Jakob Boschhoff leading, and he's got Koopmans over the back of him, and you can see just behind there that is Ben Hicks who's trying to close up, as that is Jeremy DeBova there between them, a lap down after an incident on the opening lap, putting him down 30 places once again. And Jeremy DeBova has had perhaps one of the worst runs of luck or form over the races here And so far as he makes his way around on the circuit right now, and as he comes all the way through and comes through turn 5 and up into 6, we look a bit further around town and we can see that it's Tom Edmonds meanwhile in P20 here, the pro driver, the RD Simsport driver, who is trying to close up to the back of James Slate, and he's got to try and get through soon because he's got Ankerson who's going to be closing up. Ankerson is only what is the best part of 2.5 seconds down. Of course, the advantage that Edmonds does have here is the fact that he's got a traffic jam of what is Colin Martin, Morten Oosterhuis and also Matthew Addy all are blocking Ankerson from capitalising here. So I think Edmonds is going to take this place by going on the low as he comes out of 6 and into 7, and by doing so as he goes through the banking here, it's going to be an opportunity to get ahead and go charging after Holman, who is 3 seconds up the road and gradually pulling away here. Holman in the Ferrari, but I think he does have the toe of what is Paul King. As you can see here, Colin Martin trying to unlap himself, and this is uncomfortable territory for Colin Martin. As you can see, he backs out in the end because otherwise if he came out in front after the chicane, he'd be expected to obey the blue flags and give the position up once more, and that's the last thing he would want to have to deal with. As we can see, it's the case that right now Tom Edmonds really having to try and make a recovery here in terms of chasing after Holman, who is 3 seconds up the road. Of course, Edmonds, in terms of his start, he's lost 9 places overall, but it's not a situation which he can't recover from in terms of getting back into that fight for the upper positions of the pros. He's just got to get himself close to Holman, but Holman is a long way away. And speaking of James Holman, we can see him here, the RD Simsport driver, making his way into turn 1 in the Ferrari 488, and he's just got what is Paul King ahead of him right now. And of course, for Holman in this situation, he's got Stephen Norman behind him who's a lap down. It is a situation where Holman would love an opportunity to chase after Landry, and to give you an idea, the Canadian who's in the same class as him is just up here, and Landry in P7 in the pro class, and that is P15 overall as they emerge from turn 3. I think for Landry at this point, what he needs to do is find a way to get through this traffic jam because he's got dirt bouts ahead of him and he needs to break away and go chase down any of because right now he's being pushed backwards towards Holman. As you can see, he squeezes his nose there on dirt bouts coming through turn number 5. They're side by side on the exit, they're hairpin here, battling for position, and Bouts does not want to lose was essentially his buffer to Garton and King behind. Garton's made a very strong start, it should be pointed out by the way. It's a case that he is up into a P6. He's gained the best part of 23 positions in this opener so far, and as we can see them make their way on through here, it is the case that as they come charging around that Landry, simply not able to find a way past Bouts right now, and Bouts again going into the centre of the road here, but I think this time the Delta Motorsport driver Landry is going to go round the outside as we can see Garton looking for that opportunity here, but I think what Garton is trying to do is just trying to get as close as possible to make the move, and as they make their way through the chicane you can see that Garton not able to make it, but as we ride on board here with the BMW driver you can see that by staying that close to the back of Landry, who did get through, it's given Garton the ability to be well within the tow zone of what is Bouts now as they make their way through 12 and head up towards the start finish line to go onto lap number 7. Now as they come charging through here, of course for Callum, what he's got to think about, does he go for the move early or does he wait for the next lap? As we can see that Bouts looking to come back at what is Landry here. Now is this just simply to burn off some of the speed? Well, you're going to see Garton's going to try and capitalise, but he's not close enough to do so. But Bouts versus Landry, and there's a bit of contact which knocks Bouts wide, and Garton comes on through there. As you can see, he's just simply put his elbows out and said, I'm coming through as well, as I think Bouts flashing his lights there in a little bit of fury. As meanwhile, it is the case with Garton coming through. We can see Edmonds now closing up to this pack of battlers as they all come charging through turn number 3. But looking back into the centre, Paul King right now will be thinking to himself, well, I've gained a place and now I'm going to try and gain one more very shortly, chasing after Garton, as we do see the Callum Garton here battling with what Holman, and he's coming on through turn 4, and I think Holman's starting to fall back a little bit there as Garton making the move and going up into P15, but definitely getting his elbows out as they come through 5 and up towards 6. Now meanwhile, with all this happening in the midfield, you'd be wondering at this point, what about the battles to the top 10? Well, I can tell you that George Bland right now, we've got 2 AM drivers here battling for P10. This is P2 effectively in the AM class that they're battling for, and it is Bland from MMV Esports versus Arjan Kregel here. Arjan Kregel racing for Team Racing Netherlands as they make their way down towards what is turns 8, 9, 10 and 11, down towards the bus stop chicane, and as they come charging down here into the braking zone, you can see it's the case that Kregel going defensive, Bland on the outside, and as they come on through, it's going to be one of those situations where I think Bland's not going to be able to find a way through, but look who's now being held up by all this. It's the pro driver Tony Verschaft here, and he'll want to get clear of this as soon as possible because Billy Fletcher right now is only the best part of 3.5 seconds to 4 seconds up the road from these guys, and he will want that opportunity to close up as rapidly as possible, but will he be able to find it? That is the big question. I think it's going to be some way away. in terms of looking for that as they make their way down towards another lap. And you can see already Tony Verschaff looking for that run on the low line here. Will he be able to find it? That's the question. I do not think so at this point in time, as we see Verschaff coming onto the inside here, and as they make their way, and Will Bland is not going to battle this one hard. He's going to try and get the cutback and get the run out of the corner here so he can put the pressure on Verschaff to push pressure onto what is Kregel here. Bland just simply trying to stay as close as possible to the Pro, so that way when the Pro does go past Kregel, which you would expect to happen, given that Arjan Kregel and Verschaff are both part of the same team, you think they'd have a little bit of coordination here, and you can see the pass has been made. It's been made in a way that doesn't hurt Kregel that badly, and the fact he just simply lifted out, but it's not worked in fact, as Verschaff is now tucked in behind once again, and I think Verschaff was hoping he could get it in the run through 4 and up into 5, as we see Kregel goes incredibly deep there, and Bland is going to come on through as Kregel gets it wrong under braking, and he's going to drop well down the order as he now rejoins. As the overtakes start to kick in, we can see here it's a situation whereby Kregel has just simply lost out considerably from that mistake, and now as we look around the field, it's going to be one of those situations where I do think for what is the purposes of Kregel, he's got to try and find a way back into it. But Bland now up into P2 in the AM class and P11 overall, as he's let Ebony Obava through. I think Bland at this point won't be complaining too much, as meanwhile I can tell you right up the front of the field, it's Stephen Koopmans here, the leader of the AM class. He's currently in P2, the RP Motorsports AM driver here, and he's got the pressure of Beck. That's Anthony Beck behind him, but he won't mind that too much, as meanwhile I can tell you that Matt Caruana will have him really put in that solid effort for the purposes of what was the sprint race, and in the end seeing it all fall apart at the end of the instant between himself and Hakan Grostad. He's now up into P4 here is the Pro driver, and that is the leader of the Pro category as they battle in the run down towards what is turn number 1 here, and you can see trying to go around the outside is Harper, and he's going to go for it here is Harper versus Heremans, and this is all for position within class, and Harper makes the move around the outside and keeps it very tight and almost slotted in like a jigsaw piece there in terms of just fitting in. I think Heremans is deciding to let these guys battle and just stay with them, the RP Motorsports Experts driver. I think he's going to try and play it wise here, know that they've got a little bit more pace than them and they're in identical machinery, so if he can stay with them and use the double toe off the back of Harper and Caruana, he's going to be pulled away from Fletcher. Where is Billy Fletcher in his Audi, mind you? Well, he's only here 1.7 seconds down. And whilst he hasn't got the speed on the straights, he's definitely flying through the arena section right now, and that's where Fletcher is gaining the time as he makes his way on through. But meanwhile, as they come all the way round, once again, we can see here Fletcher trying to close up to the back of Kenny Heremans, but he can't do it at this point in time as they go out on to the banking once again because of the slipstream element, but he will try and come on through it shortly as he makes his way around. Meanwhile, as we look a bit further down the road, we can see it's the situation right now where we do have Tom Edmonds closing up to the back of Dirt Bounce here, but of course remember, change of class in terms of Edmonds in the Pro class versus Bounce in the Pro class, so I don't think it's going to be too much of a challenge, or will it be, of course, given that Bounce right now wants to close up to King, who is the best part of 1.5 seconds ahead and getting away quite rapidly. Further down, though, I can tell you that side by side right now in the battle for P37, this is Reese Carroll versus what is at the moment. You can see he flashes lights there, Peter Kupius, and I think the AM driver just simply flashed his lights to say, I'm letting you go, I'm not going to battle this one. As we see the Drive Dead Racing driver makes another place up, but he's got a long way to go to make places up. The next driver on his list is a fellow driver in class, and that is Blomqvist, who is 4.3 seconds up the road. But meanwhile, at the head of the race right now, I can tell you that Jakob Boshoff had, well, it's the case that I think we've had a multiple change of position here because we've got Koopmans who's still behind, but Jakob Boschoff into the lead, but it's the case. In fact, my apologies, folks, that is a backmarker car. That's what is Debova, that is Jeremy Debova there, who Boschoff has just found his way on through. And what has happened to Koopmans here? Well, he's had an off circuit, I believe, as he's dropping down the order like a stone right now. And I think Koopmans has just had a really bad run through turns 1 and 2. I'm not hearing that he's had a moment in terms of a crash or anything along those lines or an off track. So I think he may have just got it wrong coming through turn 1 and 2. And as a result, he's just let effectively P2 through to P5 past him as he makes his way now into the turn 5 hairpin here. Gets it nice and collected together. But Koopmans has got a long advantage over Arjan Kregel. Kregel a long way back in the hunt for the AM lead right now, so I think for Koopmans he can just keep his head down and keep with these guys, keep the pace, and he will be on course to win the race. Of course, the strategy element will pay dividends to that, and we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But with this all happening right up the front of the field, looking a bit further down right now, I can tell you in terms of retirements, we have had 3 retirements in this race so far. Neil Butler, Arjen Bakker and Ben Hicks. But beyond them, we still have 52 of our drivers running. And our last place man at the moment is this man right down here. And that is Matthew Hodges here down in P52. And he is, of course, trying to catch up to Van Utrecht, who is 8.5 seconds up the road from him. He's right now having to deal with the front runner, Van Hoenacker, who is a lap up on him, the CXR Project Black driver in the Pro-Am category. speed, just trying to keep his head down and potentially try and find some points, or at least a bit of time to get used to racing amongst his peers here today. But meanwhile, looking at from the back of the field, back up towards the middle of the field. In the meantime, what I can tell you is the case that Christoph Kereki's here in P20, the Delta Motorsport driver, not really making too much ground at this point in time. P11 in class, P20 overall, and trying to chase after Bland. But the next driver on his list in terms of his own class will be Anders Ankersen. And Ankersen, to give you an idea, is here in P16 right now. As you can see, Dirtbout's flashing his lights, I think, to get the signal to say, I'm not going to make this pass here. But the RD Simsport driver does seem in that 911 to be struggling a little bit for that top end speed. We did expect that potentially the 911 was going to be hurt with its top end speed limitation here around Daytona, and that is coming to fruition as he makes his way now down into turn number 3 once more. And you can see bounce all over the back as we got a car away with there, and I do believe that, unless I'm very much mistaken, we'll have to find out who that was very shortly. I think that was James Holman who had a major moan. But meanwhile, speaking of moments here, we've got Robert Sunik who's making work of James Slate as they make their way through turns 1 and 2 and now down into 3, and that is Matthew Addy behind, who is a lap down here, as we can see Sunik trying to get the pressure onto Ed Lack in order to try and gain that position, P24. As they come on through. And meanwhile, a little bit further down, I can tell you the Hacken Shot right now has found his way past James Slates as well, as we see the Bright Esports driver here making his way through turn number 4 and up into 5. The number 101 car here simply keeping his head down and trying to find some more places to make up as he comes through the turn 5 hairpin and makes his way up towards turn number 6. But meanwhile, looking from these guys, let's take a look back at what happened to James Holman only a moment ago. So we can see James Holman here in the lead car in this pack, and as he made his way down into what was turn number 3 here, we're going to see contact, or was it, well, there was a bit of contact then. He was turned by the looks of things by a brief tap with the Ferrari alongside, but fortunately for Holman it was not catastrophic. He's just lost him a couple of places, but Holman is back racing once again. As meanwhile, I can tell you that whilst we were looking at a replay, it's now Matt Caruana who has passed Jaco Boschoff for the overall lead of this race, and Caruana, who's come through the field rather rapidly here, is really making that ground, and he's already cleared the rest of the field, and now he's going to try and make the full break here to go on to win this race in the Pro Class. As meanwhile, further behind, we can see the P2 man in Pro Class, and that is Elliot Harper here trying to close up to him, but he's a long way back, is Harper. When I say a long way back, it does look as though 1.3 seconds isn't that far back. Well, here it can feel like a lifetime, especially when you've got back markers and also a driver in another class between you and the guy you're targeting, as we see Franken moving out the way there and letting Harper through, as the Luxim 24 of MV Esports driver here will try to hunt down Caruana. What he'll want to do in order to achieve that is he'll want to utilise Jaco Boschoff as much as he possibly can in order to pull him close, but will he be able to do it? That is the big question as they now make their way up onto the bank in the 7 once more. We'll have to wait and see, as Harper is now starting to gain. We ride on board here with Harper briefly, and you can see ahead how Caruana has found his way through Jochen Seeger, who is a lap down the AM driver, and he's going to be in the mix here as well, as we see Harper coming down in towards the chicane. And it is the case that Boschoff looks at the potential cut in here, but Seeger stays in the end. Well, he moves offline. In fact, he does the rallycross line here, and you can see that Harper having to lift off there, as I think Jochen Seeger just simply mistimed in terms of where he was going to place the car, and instead took the rallycross line and tried to hold the car to the inside. As we see now Harper tucking down on the low ground here, and it's going to be Boschoff who tucks in behind him to take the position, as Harper now goes chasing after our race leader. But has this not worked out for Harper? That's the question, of course, given the fact that Boschoff is going to be very close behind as they make the run over that timeline to go on to lap number 13. But I do think at this situation it's going to be one of those points whereby we can see behind Kenny Heremans here trying to get into the mix as well, as Heremans is closing up and will now look to get past Jaco Boschoff to go hunting after Harper. Behind them we have Billy Fletcher, the Audi driver here, the rearmost Audi driver. He's got Franken and DeBova just ahead of him, and speaking of Franken and DeBova, they'll be battling for position here. What the fact they're both in the same class, as we can see Franken looking for the move here versus DeBova, and DeBova goes wide. In fact, Gus Franken in the AM class there, not in the same class, but getting it done, and DeBova moving out of the way as we've got those blue flags waving for these guys. And it's Billy Fletcher who now has to navigate a very tight section here through turn 4 up into 5, but he finds a way through in the end, with Franken holding on the inside line there and backing off the throttle. But meanwhile, looking from these guys battling further down the field to right up towards the front, once again we see Kenny Heremans here trying to close up, and he is very close to Bakayoko Boshov as Boshov goes a bit deep there through 6, and as he emerges up onto the bank in the 7 here, I think Boshov is simply going to just release the throttle very gently and tuck in behind, but we can see this is costing Heremans, and it's not ideal for Heremans. He would have liked to have gained the toe in the run down towards the chicane. Now he's got to do it on pure brute pace alone. Will he be able to do it? That's the question, as he tries to go chasing after P2 and our eventual race leader. That's Matt Caruana, who is up further up the road. Now, of course, we have had one third of this race complete so far, and after the initial theatrics, it has calmed down to quite a significant extent right now, and we are just waiting to see how it all potentially evolves once the strategic element begins to play out. But whilst we are waiting, of course, we'll be keen to hear your thoughts in the chat in terms of what's happening as well. Looking further down, we do have Hakon Grifstad right now in the McLaren, who after that P3 in what was the sprint race, of course, a little bit of a controversial P3, but that has been covered up. When I say controversial, in terms of the contact between himself and Matt Caruana at the end, but as they make their way around now, we can see that Grifstad here making his way down towards the chicane and looking to make the move on Shot here, and Shot of course in the pro category. So for Grifstad, it's going to be one of those cases where he'll be just looking to make a quick move through. As we see ahead of him, we've got Matt Emmons, who is a lap down in P49 at this current point in time, and it has not been a good day for Emmons. As we see Grifstad closing up to the back of Shot and getting ever closer as he builds up that speed, and we're hearing that Jochen Siegert has had a moment out on circuit. He's had a major moment in P41. We'll find out what's happened very shortly. It's Daniel Holmer as well. We're going to see Grifstad here drag racing his way past the BMW of what is Shot through the toe, but as he makes his way now across that timeline to go on to another lap, to go on to lap 14, is it a little bit premature here, or is he expecting Shot to back off? Well, Shot does back off in the end, and Grifstad gains the position, and now he's got a 4.5 second delta to close down to Robert Lasunic. We see Matt Emmons moving off the racing line as well. So in terms of what happened to what was Jochen Siegert moments ago, when Siegert making his way through, but that car does look very heavily damaged, and in fact there is something wrong with that BMW. That next gen racing BMW is not in a happy place. What happened to Jochen Siegert? So this was only moments ago. He was running at the time in P41, now coming through turns 2 and up into 3. Did he get it wrong in turn 3 here? Did he just simply go too deep? Well, the rear of the car jutted out, and he parked the car and he resumed to go racing. And that's Daniel Holman, Daniel Holmer, I should say, who was involved in that. And in fact, Holmer had nowhere to go, as we're going to see from the onboard here. The Bright Esports driver was coming through the corner, and I think he was expecting Siegert just to simply park the car, but Siegert got on the throttle, and that was the contact. And that's very unfortunate for Holmer, who was trying to make some ground in the race, and now he's got a long way to go. But meanwhile, as we come back to our live pictures here, we look back to our P22 man, that Dadswell right now, who's chasing down Tom Mail here, but you can see Mail on the upper path here in the Lamborghini Huracan is trying to find his way past Arjan Kregel, but this is the difference in the straight line speed of the three cars here, and the fact that it's the case that Dadswell has got the slipstream off the back of Kregel, and you're going to see Dadswell here down on that low line will gain the pro class position, as we see that it's the case that Mail decides to jump into the pits. He's had enough of being out on this stint, and he's decided to go into the pits to get the fuel in the car, and also to potentially get himself some clear air out on circuit right now, as we see Dadswell having to battle with Kregel here, and Kregel trying to hold position as firmly as he possibly can right now. And I think for Kregel, as he makes his way out of turn 1 into 2, we're going to see Dadswell go to the outside, inside through 2, and as he comes down to 3, I think he's going to nail this under braking, although there was a bit of contact there from Kregel, I think, locking up the brakes, but fortunately it has not sent the Altitude Esports driver wide at all as they now emerge from turn 3. But that was very close for comfort, and now as they make their way out towards 4 and 5, I think we will start to see that natural separation between the two drivers based on their approaches to turn number 5 as they make their way through the corner once again. But meanwhile, as we look further down the road, we can see it's Mark Fletcher here in P25, the Altitude Esports driver, who's trying to close up to the back of what will be James Slates. But before he does, he's got Hodges and Utrecht, who are both a lap down just ahead of him right now, and that means that it's going to be some time before he goes hunting for another position. And his closest rival in terms of his own class is Hakon Gristad, who is the best part of what is 8 to 10 seconds up the road right now. And for Fletcher, I think he's just got to get his head down and try to chase after. And this is Mark Fletcher. Of course, we've got 2 Fletchers racing this series. We can see that Mark Fletcher is just trying to get past the back markers. As meanwhile, up front in the race for the lead right now, we can see Billy Fletcher battling with Kenny Heremans here. The Audi driver on the outside of Fletcher versus Heremans on the inside in the Huracan. And as they make their way into turn 1, Fletcher once again holding that inside line, that more natural racing line, and holding the position as he chases after Harper. Now, of course, Harper being Fletcher's teammate here, are they going to try and work something out together to try and make a break away from Heremans? Or is it the case that Fletcher will just need to try try and find a way past his teammate and then run off into the distance and use Harper as a rear gunner? Or will it be Harper who tries to make the break or goes defensive versus these two right now? There's many questions here, because whilst they're in the team, it doesn't mean that team orders are going to be at play as they make their way through 4 and up into 5 here. And it does look as though right now Harper holding position. This is enabling Caruana to gradually creep off into the distance. He's 3 seconds up the road right now, but he hasn't got the slipstream compared to the guys behind him. Of course, it'll be Harper who doesn't have the toe either. So as a result, Fletcher and Heremans will naturally gain time over the leaders as they make their way onto the bank once again. And it's Fletcher right now on that charge with Heremans close behind him. But Heremans falling a little bit back this time as he emerges from 6 and up into 7. I think for Heremans at this point, I think he sent the message through to Fletcher, which is, I can come for that position. I've got the speed, I've got the slipstream to do it, but I'm not going to force anything major right now because we're looking to score a bigger prize, which is the overall win, as they make their way down towards the chicane once more and they come on through. And of course, this is a great opportunity for both Fletcher and also Heremans to do a bit of fuel saving behind Harper. Harper will essentially be punching that hole in the air and giving them that straight line speed boost, and Fletcher and Heremans can just short shift a little bit earlier in order to save fuel. As meanwhile, further down, we can see we've got Paul King here who's trying to navigate the plethora of cars, and it does look as though King holding position right now behind him. He's got Ankerson ahead of him. He's got Landry, 2 drivers in the Pro class versus him in the Pro-Am class, and we can see that it's the case that as they make their way through the chicane. Looking back up front, we've got Fletcher making the pass here and Harper going up high there to let Fletcher through. So they have made the trade a position here, but what will happen in terms of now, will Harper try to come back or will Fletcher break away and Harper essentially acts as a rolling roadblock for P3 versus Heremans? Of course, it's the case that Harper, I think, has got a lot of pace in that Lamborghini, but when's he going to deploy it? As they make their way through 3, and we can see Heremans all over the back of Harper here as they emerge from the corner. And we ride on board here with Heremans, and it's the case of Lamborghini versus Lamborghini and then an Audi up front. But do remember, all 3 of these cars are running effectively the same engine, with the Audi engine being in the back of the Lamborghini Huracan, but tuned of course by different racing divisions. And as they make their way out of 5, you can see all 3 drivers, they're pushing it to the limit, none more so than Fletcher at the front, who almost ran wide there and had a little bit of an oversteer moment as they now come through 6 and out onto the concourse of 7. And as they emerge, now it's the case we're going to see the 2 Lamborghinis really gain on the straight. As I can tell you, meanwhile, Caruana up the road has lost 2 temps to these guys, so they are gradually starting to catch up to Caruana, but it's a long way to go here, and I think these 3 need to find a way of peacefully working together to close the leader down right now, because unless it's going to come by strategy, it's going to be the case that Caruana is always going to have just a little bit of a gap, as we can hear Heremans lifting off the throttle here, and I think that is the sign, of course, that he's doing fuel saving and not wanting to disrupt the order of things as they make their way through the chicane and charge around towards another lap as they go on to lap number 17 in short order. As they're making their way on through right now, I can tell you that further down the road, it is a situation where Daniel Blomqvist has made some more ground, and he's in P34 as it currently stands. He's up into P34 and now trying to continue his way up. As you can see, has left the pit lane after spending the best part of 5.5 minutes in the pit lane to repair damage to the car. I think it was a collapsed front axle as we saw earlier on, and in fact he's jumped back to the pit, so I think they've still got more work to do on the car. It hasn't worked out. But meanwhile, further up the road here in the battle for what is P10, we've got Garton here trying to come past Tony Verschaft, and whilst they're not in the same class, Garton would love to come through here to give himself another car between himself and Paul King behind, but Garton not able to find a way through this time, but he does look for the cutback here out of 1, and Verschaft goes deep. Now this could be a major opportunity. It's going to be a drag race through 2 and up into 3. They're going to go side by side here, and Garton's going to look for it around the outside, but Verschaft puts the car on the inside there and says there's no way through. As you can see, Landry behind, almost getting his nose into the mix there and trying to get past Garton, because for Landry right now, Landry would love that opportunity to go hunting after Verschaft in the hunt for what is P7 in the Pro category, but of course he's got the Pro-Am driver between himself and, well, his opponent as they make their way down into turn number 5. Now it's very difficult for Landry at this point, because I think he would love to really force the issue and try and get in there to get the position off of Garton, but in doing so he could cost himself major time and let Verschaft just disappear off into the distance. And when I say a distance, a 1 to 2 second window would be enough to essentially neutralise a good amount of the slipstream tow around turn 7 and 12 as they make their way up onto the turn 7 banking right now. And that is the thing that has to be considered as they make their way around once again, is whether Landry can close up or not. As meanwhile, as they come charging on through here, We look a bit further down the order, and I can tell you that Dadswell, meanwhile, down in P30 as it currently stands, trying to close up to the back of Tom Mail here as they make their way through the corner. Not able to do so for the time being, but Dadswell doing everything he can. He's only 3.5 tenths down on Mail, to be fair. They're both battling for pro positions in terms of P15 in the pro category as they come through turn number 4 and up into 5 here, but no way through at this time. And I do think for Dadswell right now, he's got to try and do it all in the arena to get as close as possible to the back of that Lamborghini Huracan to close up through the slipstream. It's not a car built for straight line speed here as the Porsche. It's built for handling. You're definitely seeing that right now as they make their way through turn number 6 here, and Dadswell the best part of 4 tenths off, but not close enough as we are hearing some more pit stops are starting to occur. George Bland into the pit lane. Koopmans is in P15 right now. I think Koopmans has been passed by multiple drivers now. Has Koopmans come into the pits recently? I believe he may have. We're just trying to check our data screen at the moment. Koopmans not into the pits, in fact. So where is Koopmans in all this? Well, he's dropped all the way down to 15. He's dropped like a stone down to P15, and I'm wondering if something has happened to Koopmans over the course of his most recent lap. It doesn't look like. I think he's just let a lot of drivers through to give himself some breathing room right now, but in doing so, he does still have a 19-second advantage over Arjan Kregel, who's his rival for the lead in what is the AM class right now, as we can see Koopmans making his way through turn number 5. So I think he's going to be safe as those pit stops are now starting to occur, and we do have ahead. That's Holman there, just disappearing and reappearing off your screen, but that's a little bit of a latency issue. As we can see, Koopmans just holding firm right now and keeping his head down and getting on with this race as we look further down the order, and we can see down in P45 right now and chasing after the AM driver of Emmons, that is Peter Lemkins here in P45. He is, of course, a lap down on the lead as the Belgian driver having that disastrous start, and the RP Motorsports Juniors driver will know to use this one as a character building experience and get ready to go once again. And in terms of going into round number 2 as he makes his way out of turn 5 and up into 6, and as he comes through the left-hander here, it's one of those situations where for Lemkins, I think he's just doing, oh goodness me, and Lemkins getting it wrong there on the exit, and the car unsettling massively. And I think with the damage he's also got that car, it's time to jump to the pits for Lemkins and do some repair work, because it is not a comfortable car to drive, I can't imagine. But meanwhile, from one driver who's in the pits to a driver who's out there right now and putting everybody else in the pits in terms of just simply nailing it in terms of the pace, it is Jakob Boshoff right now, the South African driver, driving a very strong race. I mean, he started up towards the front, which did give him a bit of an advantage, but then again, he's got to have the pace in order to hold that lead and make sure that he's not being hounded by Pro-Am drivers who are coming through the field. And Boshoff is doing fantastic at that right now as the Motorsport Spark driver, doing everything he needs to, as he's got ahead Enio Bava come through. We've got some of the pro drivers starting to really make their way through and take the lead of this race overall, but Bosch still holding firm up front. As meanwhile, in the situation for Callum Reed-Garton, well, he's been trying to find his way through the drivers around him, the pros around him, for a good number of laps. He's still got Landry behind him. He's still trying to find his way past Tony Verschaft in equal machinery, and Verschaft just seeming to have a little bit more in the tank in terms of overall pace by comparison. It is a difficult situation for Garton right now in terms of he's trying to close up here, but he's just not able to do enough until those heavy braking zones, and alternatively, when he does get close enough, it might be the opportunity of a move to know that Verschaft comes back past him on the next run round on the bank. So for example, coming down here into the chicane, it could be the case that Garton goes to move, but of course then Verschaft will have the tow, making his way round from turn at number 11 through to turn 1 once again, and that is the difficulty that Garton is facing right now. If he tries to make a move to gain that position, he can make it in the arena potentially, but at what cost to his race time in chasing down Boshoff? And I think he's hoping that Verschaft can pull him along, but Garton right now is just having to keep pushing and hope that an opportunity arises. Of course, the pit window is open right now. We would expect a lot of our drivers to pit around the midpoint of the race or just after the midpoint, and Garton staying right there with Verschaft. He's getting very close to the back right now, a bit too close for comfort here as they make their way through what is coming down into turn number 1 right now, and as they come down here, will Garton be able to find his way on through? That is the big question. No, not again, and instead he has to wait for that opportunity, and that is going to be the frustration. You can see there Verschaft going very deep on the exit one and not getting on the power and early enough, and Garton very close to the result. Now, will he try and force the move into 3? He can't quite find it, and that's enabling Landry to close up. As meanwhile, we are hearing that we've got a number of drivers coming into the pits. Arjan Kregel in the pit lane as well now. We've got Gripstad, who has come through up into P16 as a result of that, and Romano as well. And coming up as places are being changed, but right now for Garton, he can't find a way on through here, and this is really hurting his race in terms of running behind Verschaft and getting too close for comfort on a number of points on the lap. But going from these guys to a bit further down, talking about drivers who are running close once again, where it is the case that Dadswell has found his way past Tom Male, that should be pointed out, and as Male now stuck behind Dadswell, will he try and find a way on through? We'll have to wait and see. But you're probably wondering at this point as well, how did this overtake happen? We'll give you a replay of that very shortly. As we just see if Mal tries to come back through into turn 1. He doesn't find the way through it, and instead Dadswell holds on for the time being. Although has to park it a little bit on the apex there, and as a result Mal gained a bit more speed, but then Dadswell does have that traction out the corner in the Porsche, which works to his advantage as they make their way down into 3. Now how did the pass happen? Here we go. So it was a slipstream battle here, and George Bland also in the mix as they made their way through, and this was on the previous lap. And you see Bland at the rear of the picture there, and Dadswell down on the lower side on the inside, and Mal coming through on the upper part. And Bland, of course, the AM driver here, and the two pros dropping him rather rapidly after this. But that's how Dadswell got it done, through slipstream and taking the lower line into turn 1, as we now jump back to the live pictures here, and as they make their way around. Meanwhile, further up the road, we've got a lot of pit stops starting to occur. We've pretty much got a majority of our drivers coming in up the front right now, as I can tell you. For example, we have got Tom Edmonds coming in, the RD Simsport driver, but drivers not to pit, interesting enough, as we will just wait for things to settle down on the screen. We've got Billy Fletcher here making his way through turn number 4 and up into 5 as he comes through. He's leading the race right now, but he is still to make a pit stop here, and I think the reason we've had a cluster of drivers coming in because everybody wants to try and stay in the toe of the drivers around them, so that way they gain time when they exit the pits by having a slipstream partner. But Fletcher deciding to play it different here, deciding to go longer than the rest of his counterparts in the battle for the overall race win and the pro lead, as he makes his way through what is turn at number 6 and up onto 7 right now. But as he's making his way around, I can tell that Jakob Boschhoff coming out the pits right now. He's got Tom Edmonds just behind him, and Edmonds making a rather rapid stop, in fact, as they come out. You can see behind all the drivers coming through here, as we do have Mark Fletcher making his way through the Altitude Esports Race. He's just going to avoid a traffic jam behind him. That's Tony Verschaft at the head of this jam, and Landry has come out behind him. Now you can see Landry there, but the big question, of course, is in all of this, where was our prime driver who was caught up in all this? Well, Garton has decided to stay out, it should be pointed out. So right now, Landry behind Verschaft, and now Landry can go to work on potentially hunting down that P11 position overall, and what is effectively, when all is said and done, the P8 to P7 position in the pro category will be P7. But Landry's been waiting for this opportunity, and now that Garton has decided to separate himself from the group by going longer, as we hear that Billy Fletcher is into the pits, so a lap later than the rest of the lead contingent. Now, will that benefit him or will it hurt him? That is the question. We'll have to wait to find out. But now Landry will try to go on the offensive versus Verschaft. It'll be Ferrari power versus BMW power, and if we know anything about that BMW, is that it's very strong on the straights here at Daytona, and that, all the straights and also the curves, and as a result, that is going to hurt him massively in terms of being able to close up over time as he makes his way down towards turn 8 into the chicane. Landry. Now, meanwhile, looking a bit further up the road, I can tell you that Tom Edmonds, meanwhile, is gaining some time here by continuing to run along. He's already made his pit stop, in fact, and Edmonds, because of making that early pit stop, is now chasing down Jakob Boschhoff. He's going to look for the move here as they make their way down and around towards turn number 1, and Edmonds will go up into P7 overall, and that will be P6 in the pro category. But Edmonds gaining as a result of this, and meanwhile, if you're wondering where Caruana and Fletcher have come out together, well, it is the case that right now, as Edmonds takes that position, our race leader is resumed as Matt Caruana after the pit stops, and Fletcher, with that in the slightly later pit stop, has come out the best part of 3.2 seconds down on Caruana, but he's come out ahead of Harper and Kenny Heremans by a significant margin. Heremans, in fact, has had a really slow stop by comparison, because Heremans is now 5.7 seconds down on Harper here, and he's got some traffic between himself and Harper, which is only going to put a sting in the tail as he makes his way now up into turn number 5. So Heremans, I think, may be slightly out of contention for that podium unless he can find a way to close up to Harper on pure pace. We'll have to wait and see as he emerges out of turn 5 and heads up towards turn number 6. But with this happening and more pit stops still on the way further down the order, Jean-Louis Deschamps in the pits, as is Callum Brent right now. I can tell you that looking a bit further down the order in terms of looking outside of our top 30, we do here have what is Phil McDougall right now, the CXR Project Black driver. He has, I believe, made his pit stop. In fact, he's had to make 2 pit stops due to damage picked up at the start of this race. But McDougall right now down in P36, having a difficult day at the races and trying to chase down DDD Vlaming, who is 7 seconds up the road from him. But Jeremy DeBova just recently into the pits, and that may help McDougall out in terms of time. We'll have to wait and see, of course, whether he's able to gain the place on DeBova as he makes his way around and down towards what is the start-finish line to go on to what for McDougall is lap number 23. Looking a bit further up the road as he does pass Jeremy DeBoer, who's still in the pit lane and being serviced. I can tell you that Dirt Bounce right now is closing up to the back of George Bland. Of course, it's the Pro-Am driver versus the Am driver here, and it looks as though Bland staying on that inside line here as they make their way down towards the chicane, and as you can see them going down, it's going to be the case that Bounce is going to have to go around the outside to inside here, and Bland and Ian backing it off just enough, but I think trying to say to Bounce, okay, I'm going to let you through, but get a move on because I need that speed. I want to catch up. So Koopman's ahead. As you can see, they emerge from the chicane here, and Bounce having a really poor run out of 11. As a result, Bland now has to take the higher line because he was so close on exit that he's not able to capitalise from getting a tow. And to give you an idea, well, Koopman's in terms of his position up the road, he's the best part of 15 seconds up the road from these guys. So if Bland was able to clear Bounce and get chasing, and Koopman's was to have a couple of moments where it hasn't worked out, with Koopman setting a 45.7 last time around. Meanwhile, Bland by comparison a 46.1. Well, I do think Koopman's has got the pace here as Bland has to go around the outside. They're still battling here for position, albeit they're not battling for position in class, but they are going to take this one to the wire as they come through 2 and up into 3, and it does look as though Bland really trying to get a move on here and saying to Bounce, look, you're going to have to really put some pace down here, otherwise I'm going to come back at you for the position. Class or no class, I will want that position back as they make their way through 3 and up towards 4. But meanwhile, looking from these guys to a little bit further up the road after the pit window, I can tell you that Dadswell, meanwhile, now behind Tom Mount as they come through turn number 5. And of course, Dadswell was ahead of Mount before the pit stops happened, but now they've had the switch. And as they make their way down towards turn number 6 here, now Dadswell's got to do it all again in finding a way past. Will he be able to find it? We will have to wait and see as they come on through turn number 6 and up into 7 here. And as they go charging around, it's going to be one of the situations where Paul King has just lost the position. I can tell you, he's just dropped down to what is P12 from James Holman, not in the same class, those two drivers, as we can see that Dadswell just continued to soldier on here and trying to catch up to Mal, but not able to do so, as we've also got Colin Martin there in the BMW, in the Next Gen Racing BMW, the blue BMW, representing that Next Gen Racing blue, making his way through what is the chicane and backing out the way of the two pro drivers coming charging through there and battling for position. Meanwhile, further out, I can tell you that Jason Landry has found a way past Tony Verschaft and now is going on the offensive versus Anders Ankerson as they make their way down towards turn number 1 here, and Landry up into that P9 overall, and that means he's in P7 in the Pro class right now and looking for that opportunity to get past Ankerson as soon as possible. Will he be able to? That is the big question. Well, I think he's going to have to wait until he gets up onto the bank, as we do see here there's a bit of traffic which may him out. That's Mark Fletcher moving out of the way, a lap down there, the Pro driver, as we see Landry tapping onto the back here once again of Ankerson, and they've got Navarro, well, not Navarro, that is Jeremy DeBoer ahead of them, and then they've got Beck, Anthony Beck, just a little bit further up the road here. So it does look as though at this point the traffic is bringing them all together, and this could really work out for Landry right now in terms of chasing down what is P6 in the Pro category and then going hunting after Tom Edmonds, who is a few more seconds up the road by comparison, as they make their way into turn number 6 now. And if you're wondering how Tony Verschaft was passed by Landry, here you go. So as they were making their way moments ago down towards what was turn number 1, you're going to see Landry here side by side, and I believe that is Tom, well, that's not Tom Al, that is Ankerson, who went round the outside of the pair of them here and was very brave to do so. And in fact, Ankerson with a very strong move, and perhaps the move of the day there alone, just taking the 2 place with 1 and making it count as they then made their way into the arena. And that was only a lap ago on lap number 24. But now as we look back to lap number 25, Landry a bit too far back from Ankerson, who has had a better run through the chicane, and also he has cleared what is Jeremy DeBoer. So as a result, Ankerson now making that progress up towards Anthony Beck ahead, Beck in the Pro-Am category. So as a result, this will not be for points paying positions, but it will be important for Ankerson because he can give himself the buffer to Landry behind. As you can see here already, it's the case, well, with Beck simply backing off the throttle there and letting Ankerson through, and Ankerson now will take that position and go charging after Jakob Boschoff, who's a further 4.7 seconds up the road, not in the same class, and it's Tom Edmonds who is only half a second further. So Ankerson is making the charge. Can the Dane find his way up the field, as we're hearing that Stephen Tim Koopmans has had a major moment somewhere, and that means he has lost the lead of the AM class. What happened to our AM class leader? Well, this was only moments ago on his 25th tour of the circuit into turn 1. Is it going to be a case the rear end comes round hard on him into the corner? It does indeed, just on the exit there, the rear unsettling, and the car was rotated fully, and as a result that has cost Koopmans a huge amount of time as he's had to get the car turned around. And that does mean now your race leader in the AM class is the Porsche driver, as we just tried to find him, of George Bland here, who is making his way through turn number 3 right now and chasing after what is the McLaren of Håkon Grufstad, albeit the Pro driver ahead of him. And Bland might be thinking at this point, why wasn't I smart enough to pick the McLaren once again? No, because I went with the Porsche instead. And I think Bland at this point might be thinking about his choice and looking at that McLaren that spits flames out the rear of it, but we'll have to wait and see as he makes his way through turn number 5. We'll ask him that question in the post-race interviews if he does bring home the win in the Outclass. We'll just ask him whether he was missing the McLaren, but we'll wait and find out as he makes his way through turn at number 6 and 7. And meanwhile, looking further up the road right now, I can tell you in the battle for P2, Harper has closed up to the back of Fletcher here, and our race leader of Carolina, 44.2 that last lap versus Fletcher on a 45.8, and Harper a 44.4. As we can see there, that was Navarro Dabova into the wall at turn 1. Unfortunately for these guys, just dodging the wayward Audi R8 that's now rejoined the racing. But I do think it's the case that for Harper really starting to get moving, I think trying to get the message through to his teammate here. Look, matey, you're going to need to get some pace down, because otherwise I'm going to be coming back through for that P2. And at this point, Matt Caruana is being allowed the grace just to disappear off up the road by a considerable margin as they make their way through turn 4 and up into 5. And we can see that Harper just simply trying to get as close as possible here, but he's not close enough at this time. He does get the better run through turn number 5 by comparison as they make their way now up into 6. I think Fletcher, I'm wondering if Fletcher is just struggling a little bit on the tyres at this point compared to Harper. Perhaps Harper's done a little bit more work in preserving the tyres, and it's the case that Fletcher has overheated the tyres somewhat. As meanwhile, looking further down the order, we can see in the battle for P12 overall here, Holman coming through versus Paul King, gaining the position and now up into P12. That is effectively P9 in the Pro Class overall. Paul King, meanwhile, P4 in the Pro Class, down in P13 overall as they make their way on through. As they come on through what is turn number 6 and up onto 7 they go. Further down the road, meanwhile, speaking of the Pro-Ams here, we've got Jean-Louis Deschamps who's trying to find a way past Kurt Van Hohenacker here. Van Hohenacker, the AM driver, of course, and Deschamps, the Delta Motorsport Pro-Am driver, trying to find a way on through with only 12 minutes of racing to go, plus the lap that they conclude on. And as they make their way down towards turn number 3 here, you can imagine Deschamps trying to get a way in, but he's not able to find it at this point in time as they come roaring through the corners here. And as they make their way through 3 and up towards 4 and 5, I think he's going to be looking for the move here in the run down towards 5. He's going to be very close for it, but can Deschamps find a way to get it done under braking, or will Van Hohenacker defend it here? Well, he's not close enough. In fact, Van Hohenacker just taking the natural line there, feeling very safe and not lifting out. And I think as a result, Van Hohenacker just staying firm for the time being. We will wait and see as meanwhile further up the road, battling for official position in class, we can see we've got a 2x2 moment here as we've got Garton around the outside of Beck there, and Beck, I believe, Anthony Beck getting sandwiched in versus Van Utrecht, who was on that low line and he was going defensive was Beck, and that has not worked out considerably for the Briton as he makes his way through the corners right now. And that is a very painful moment for Beck, just losing the position because he found himself in the wrong place to go defensive as he comes past through what is there the Ferrari that's down, that's the number 227 car. But as they make their way up through the corners at this point, Beck really feeling that pain of being in the wrong place at the wrong time as Garton has gained another position and is now P2 in the Pro-Am and is chasing after Jason Landry, is the pro driver there. In terms of chasing after the leader, Jakob Boshoff, well, Boshoff is only 7 seconds up the road from Garton right now, and with 11 minutes to go, would it be possible? Well, I think Boshoff would need to make a mistake somewhere, but Garton could potentially be threatening right at the end of the race. And looking at the lap times right now, I can tell you that Garton set his personal best that last time around, a 44.48. Jakob Boshoff was on a 45.1. So if that was to continue, that 0.6 of a second gap, we could potentially see Garton within attacking range right at the end, but we would need Boshoff to have a poor lap somewhere in order for that to happen. It's not going to come down naturally because they've got approximately 5 to 6 more laps to go after this current one. It's going to be close, but I think Boshoff will be able to hold on as we see Garton now feeling that the pain of being caught up behind Landry to an extent, but he will gain, of course, in the run round turn 12 here as they make their way around on the bank. Meanwhile, behind, we can see Tony Verschaft here pulling off of what is the slipstream line of Beck there, but tucking back in. And I think at this point, Verschaft is trying to get the message through to Beck. Look, pull over to the right here so I can come on through because I've got Holman trying to catch up behind me. But Holman's quite a way back, of course, because the driver behind Verschaft, that there is Fletcher. That's Mark Fletcher behind them. We've got Jeremy DeBova behind them. And you can see Tony Verschaft being let through here. But let's just take a look back only moments ago at what happened to what was at the time, well, not Holman, my apologies, what happened to Beck with that moment which really hurt him in terms of his position in the race. So as they're making their way through here onto another lap, this was moments ago, you can see Landry is going to be coming on through here around what is on the down line as he made his way through. In fact, this was a little bit earlier on. My apologies, we're getting things a little bit mixed up. That was not the overtake which we were referring to. I don't think we're going to be able to get that for the time being, but Beck versus Garton, it was Cameron Garton who made the move, and it just did not work out in terms of that position. And here we go, ladies and gentlemen, the replay. So as you're going to see Beck there down the lower side, and he gets caught up behind Manutrecht, who's just backed off there to obey the blue flags, and Garton could just simply sail through, and that is very unfortunate. But now Garton off into the distance and going chasing after what is Boshoff, as Beck now tries to look to bring home a P3 in the Pro-Am category. And further up the road, I can tell you that Elliot Harper, meanwhile, in that P3 position, just simply soldiering on right now behind Billy Fletcher. And Fletcher, of course, just a little bit further up the road here, as we can see McDougall moving out the way for both of the drivers here, the two pro drivers, as we've got the Pro-Am driver who's a lap down, staying out the way. The CXR Project Black machine in the BMW at the rear of your picture there, staying firm and staying behind as they make their way on to another lap. Only another 8.5 minutes to go here, and as they make their way around right now, I think Harper might be considering trying to move a bit later on in this race. We'll have to wait and see. But speaking of somebody who'll be looking for a move soon, we can see we've got Kerekis here who's chasing after what is Dadswell, and this is for positioning class. This is the battle for P14 overall and P10, the final points paying position in the pro class here. And Kerekis trying to find a way through is the Delta Motorsport driver as he's building up the speed here. They're heading down towards the chicane. He's very close to what is the back. In fact, not the chicane. This is going down to turn one, and as they make their way over the timing line here, you can see how Dadswell just holding that inside line, and I think Christoph is going to have to look for that move on the inside, but he's not close enough to do it, but he's very close on exit here, and I think it's going to be the case as we ride on board with the BMW driver. He could look for that potential move in the run into turn 3. He's going to have to go very late on the brakes to do it. He can't quite find it right now, but you can see Dadswell really struggling to break away from the BMW in the sector where it should be the strongest of Porsche, and that is through the handling sector here of the infield. And as they make their way through turn number 4 and up into 5 here, it is the case that Delta Motorsport driver all over the back of the Porsche as they come through 5. Will it be the case as he comes into 6? He'll be sizing up the move for the run to the chicane. We'll have to wait and see here as they make their way out of turn 5 and head up towards 6. And as they come into the braking zone here, I think it's going to be the case. Kerekis just waiting for the opportunity, and now as he emerges from the corner here, the gap between the two of them 4 tenths of a second, but it will now start to close. The Porsche very strong on exit, of course, but it's not got the top end speed of the BMW, and with the slipstream in tail as well, he's now going to start building. But of course, one thing he has to worry about here as we look to the gearbox, he does have Tom Male chasing behind him, the Fast and Furious Lamborghini driver, who will be also looking to get into this mix of the battle for the final points paying position in the pro class right now. So we're going to have these 3 drivers coming together over the course of the remainder of the race, and how will they all play out, we'll have to wait and see, as we see a cone going way with their poor cone as they make their way through turn at number 11 and up towards 12. And it is the case that Dadswell having a poor run there, and Kerekis is simply coming through, and Mal comes through with him, and as a result it's going to be one of those situations now where it becomes a change of position here for 2 drivers gaining versus 1 driver who's lost 2. But meanwhile, as they make their way across that timing line, it's going to be the case that Kerekis is on the low line. Mal goes round on the outside here as they go on to what is a lap number 31, and as they come into the break, it's over turn 1. Kerekis holds the inside there versus the Lamborghini of Mal, and Mal simply now has to look for the cutback here. He needs to try and swipe back to the inside, but as they go side by side through 2 and head up towards 3 here, it's going to be a battle on the brakes, and it looks as though the Lamborghini driver has got it done on the brakes for the time being, but that was very close stuff there. And I think for the BMW driver, he literally tried to place the car as tight as he possibly could, and I think Mal had to give him a little bit more room than perhaps he intended to there, but in the end it paid off in the fact that Mal has been able to hold the position, and now it's the case the BMW driver needs to find a way to come back. But what a fantastic battle between those two. Now, will it continue to play out? Of course, as they make their way back up to the bank of turn 7 very shortly. It all depends, of course, on how well the Briton of Mal gets that run out of turn number 6. Can he nail it here for RD Simsport and bring home that valuable point in the pro category as they make their way out of the corner? We'll wait and see. As they now come around through turn number 7 here, we're hearing that Reece Carroll has had a moment. Our winner in the pro class in the sprint race has had a moment and has dropped all the way down to what is P29 overall. But as we can see here, Mal is holding position. He's also got the toe there of the driver ahead, and that's Vanutrecht, who's a lap down and will provide the benefit of the toe here, or will he as they emerge through the chicane. And with 5 minutes remaining, approximately 3 more laps after this one, we can see that Mal trying to use the toe of the back marker there to his advantage to keep him safe. He does not want the BMW driver behind him to gain in any which way in terms of slipstreaming round through turn 12. And as they all make the way up towards the timeline to go on to another lap here, I do think it's the case that Mal is safe for now, but we'll wait and see later on. I think the back marker there will just intervene this time around, or will it be the case that the BMW driver Kirkis goes for the move? He doesn't go for it this time, but he's looking for it. You can tell it's in his eyes there. It's in the attitude of the car. He knows he can look for that move into turn 1, but as they make the way through 2 and into 3, he's a bit too far back to look for it for the time being. And as they make the way now under braking through turn number 3, it is the case that all 3 drivers continue to come together here, as meanwhile further down the order I'm hearing that Jean-Louis Deschamps is looking for the move here on Lucas Romano. They're battling for a position in the Pro-Am category. This is for P9 in the Pro-Ams, P26 overall. Deschamps is going to be made to go around the outside here as they make the way across the bank of turn 12, going to the end of the current lap and on to another lap very shortly. And they're going to be side by side as they come across that timing line here, as we see Deschamps tries to get the momentum. He's got the overspeed here, but the Ferrari driver of Romano will have the braking line on the inside. He can go defensive. Now, who's going to back out here? Neither one of them wants to back out, but in the end, Romano just about holds it there, but he loses the rear end, and Deschamps is caught on the inside. They're not sighting that Romano was losing the car, and Deschamps has now got it all to do again. That's very unfortunate there, with both drivers driving on the limit, and Romano, through no fault of his own, arguably just, well, he lost the control of the car for Deschamps to go into. Deschamps just not spotting that, and instead taking the car to the pits. That's very unfortunate, as he's got to repair the damage on the car, but Romano will hold on to that P26 and P9 in the Pro-Am class. As whilst that was happening, we can look back to the battle for what is P10 in the Pro class, and we can see here Mal versus Kirkis here, and as they make their way through with turn number 12, you can see now it's the case for Mal's taking that high line in order to tuck him behind, but Dadswell is going to come through as well as they make their way towards what is turn number 1 here. And as they come charging on through, it is the case they charge onto what is that lap number 33, and I think they've got 2 more after this as they come down to that braking zone, but Mal losing the pace this time versus Dadswell. And as they come around through the corners here, now it's the case of the Porsche driver. Can he get an advantage on the BMW driver as they make their way on through? And meanwhile, in the battle for P2 overall and P2 in the Pro class, I can tell you Fletcher is still leading, but Harper is relentlessly there right now, right in the toe, and only a couple attempts back and closing this time as they come around to complete another tour of the circuit. Well, they're halfway through right now, and they're coming down towards the chicane, and as they charge through, Matt Caruana in a world of his own, 5.6 seconds up the road, but Fletcher right now, I think he's got one eye on the mirror, unless there's some team orders being deployed. Of course, we don't know for certain, but it does look as though Harper very close, but getting a poor run there through the chicane, and he's lost a lot of time as a result, as he will have 2 more laps to potentially put the move on Fletcher for P2. Meanwhile, in what is the battle here for P7, we can see Callum Garton here chasing after Ankerson as they make their way down towards the chicane here. Ankerson in the Pro category, Garton in the Pro-Am category here, so this isn't for points, but with Jakob Boshoff only 2.5 seconds up the road, if Garton could clear Ankerson, would he be able to close up to Boshoff right at the end? That would be the big question as they make their way through. And we are hearing that from Rob Sutherland in the YouTube chat there that Tom Mal had a slowdown applied. So unfortunately, Tom Mal, that's why he lost the position. But meanwhile, Garton here looking for that potential move on the back of Ankerson here as they come onto another lap, as they make their way across that timing line then. And as they come on through here, Garton just not close enough to seize the opportunity. And this must be quite frustrating for Garton, who'd like to find a way on through. But in the end, can he afford to, given the fact that Anthony Beck is only a few seconds down the road, only 6 seconds behind? If these two were to have a major incident right now, that would open the door to Beck to get in close, and Beck of course P3 in the Pro-Am category, as we're hearing Colin Martin has jumped to the pits for an incident, and the car is heavily damaged here, as we do see Anthony Beck right now trying to navigate the sandwich that is the Pro drivers around him, with a shaft ahead of him, and then Mark Fletcher behind, as we can also see in the rear view picture. That's Jeremy Debova, who's a lap down at the back of that pack. But meanwhile, our leader in the AM category right now is George Bland here, making his way through turn number 1 once again and keeping it nice and smooth. The MMV Esports driver, he's only got a couple more laps to go, and if he can keep it all as he's doing right now, it is going to work to his advantage as he comes charging through turn number 3, and as he makes his way through the corner here, it's one of those situations where as he emerges, it's going to be, I don't think he needs to do anything major at this point other than just simply bring the car home at this point, as we see further down the order, Lucas Romano closing up with with Carroll here, Reese Carroll, but you can see how they're not in the same class, and Romano at this point just backing off as we do have that checkered flag out, and it is Matt Caruana who takes the checkered flag for the opening feature race of the season. A brilliant drive from Caruana, the Apex Tech Racing driver, taking it all the way in the end to the win. Billy Fletcher in P2 when all is said and done. Elliot Harper in P3. A brilliant drive from our top three in the pro category. Kenny Herremans in the end finishes in P4 in the pro class, and overall Tom Edmonds is going to come home in P5 when all is said and done as he crosses that timeline, and it's going to be Jaco Boshoff from South Africa who takes the win in the Pro-Am category for the feature race of round number 1 at Daytona. A brilliant drive from Boshoff. Anders Ankerson at P7 overall, and Callum Reed-Garton in the end P2 in the Pro-Am. Meanwhile, we've got Jason Landry there, P7 in the Pro category, Tony Verschaff P8, and then Anthony Beck comes home in P3 in the Pro-Am. But meanwhile, looking further down the order and coming to the end of his current race as he makes his way now down towards what is the finish line here, it is going to be George Bland who returns to the top step in the season opening race. It's the feature race here, and it will be the case that Bland is able to make it to the top step and taking the win in the AM class in the feature race. A great drive from Bland in the end, and Koopmans, who had the moment which denied him the win, is going to come home P2 in the AM class when it's all said and done here. A difficult race for Koopmans where he was leading for so long to see it fall away, but there's plenty more opportunities out there, I'm sure, for him. And then it will be Kurt van Noenacker who comes home in P3. The Belgian, when all is said and done in the AM class, he'll be happy with this one, I'm sure, bringing home that P3. And of course, it will be some good points on the board for Van Hoenacker over the course of tonight's proceedings as he makes his way to take that checkered flag. We just wait to see him come across now as he makes his way through Romano Fischer, ahead of Van Hoenacker, P28 overall, of course. And meanwhile, looking back up to our winners overall, and Caruana in particular, who we caught just as he crossed the timing line. Caruana with a solid race there, and we'll hear more from him in the post-race interviews in terms of managing that race and coming through the field, and Caruana doing everything right, it would seem, and now just looking towards what will be round number 2 and having started his campaign off on a fantastic note. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will be back very shortly for our post-race interviews. Don't go anywhere, you won't want to miss them. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. Well, without further ado, as we're about to get underway with our post-race interviews, it's going to be a case that we'll start to hear from Matt Caruana, the number 27 driver, but quite a feisty feature race to follow on from what was a challenging sprint race for our drivers. And I think everyone trying to get used to racing amongst one another out of the circuit. But for one driver, Matt Caruana, I think it was quite a straightforward performance. Let's hear from him. Hello, Matt. Can you hear me?
Hiya.
Matt, a brilliant drive from start to finish in the feature race and a win at the very end of it. How does it feel to have taken the checker flag as the winner in the pro class at Daytona?
It's good to be back on the top and win a race in the new season, and hopefully pick up some good points after the sprint race, because it was a bit disappointing to get taken out on the last lap like that. But it's good to come back and get a win in the feature.
Definitely, and it was a difficult end to the sprint race, which we won't go too much into. But in terms of planning for the feature race, did that change your approach to the feature race at all in terms of your strategy, knowing you were going to start a bit further up the order than perhaps you were intending to?
Well, it made me think a bit more about how I was gonna do the start, because if I was right at the back, I would have tried to get up as quickly as possible. But I had a bit of a cushion behind me, and there was less drivers in front of me, so I thought I'd just be careful and let the race come to me.
A very smart play there and letting the race come to you. And with regards to making those moves up through the field, of course, we saw you going toe-to-toe with your championship rival from last year, from last season, Billy Fletcher there. Was there sort of reminiscence at that point in terms of thinking back to season one?
Yeah, it's great to race Billy all the time. He's really fun. It's fun to race against him, and it's quite good now. We're in different teams, so there's a bit more of a rivalry going on. But it's very good.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear. And in terms of when you got into the lead, was the idea to just make the breakaway, or were you expecting to potentially be chased down and have to navigate what would be a slipstream battle over the remaining time?
Well, I was being wary because I knew Elliot and Billy were behind me, and I knew they would work together somehow to try and catch up to me. But I was just trying to fuel save to sort of cover that.
And it definitely worked out in the end, because come the end of the race, you seemed to extend that gap from what was approximately 2.5 seconds all the way up to the best part of 5 to 6 seconds. A brilliant drive there. And then looking ahead now to Sebring in terms of in a week's time, another American circuit. How are you feeling for a rather different circuit?
Yeah, I think Sebring's a great track. It's great for racing on. It's got a lot of good corners, so I'm excited to race there.
Well, we look forward to seeing you out on the circuit in a week's time once again. But until then, congratulations on the win in the feature race at Daytona. And we look forward to seeing you in a week's time.
Thank you.
Hearing there from Matt Caruana, very happy with the result and pleased to be battling amongst familiar rivals, and we're enjoying the racing as well, and turning around what was that difficult ending to the sprint race to his advantage in the feature race. And that already shows you the signs of a championship contender in his mind in terms of needing to dig deep early on to find that result. But speaking of drivers finding results, let's come on to our Pro-Am winner, and that is Jaco Boshov. As we now await to hear from him very shortly. Hello, Yakov, can you hear me?
Hi, Paul. Yes, I can hear you.
Yakov, congratulations on what was a dominant display in the Pro-Am class from start to finish, taking the win. How does it feel to have taken the win at Daytona in the feature?
Yeah, no, I'm very excited, Paul. Second season with NXTGEN, first win, so good way to start the season off.
Oh, most definitely. And after a difficult sprint race, and knowing that you'd be starting up towards the front in the feature, did that change your approach at all, what you'd planned for the purposes of the feature race?
Yeah, to be honest, I was thinking fuel saving. But with the me being caught up in that first race, I started fifth. And then I thought, I've got a few AMs around me. I just need to get it to the front. And they never let the pros pass. And every time a pro came past, I just tried to latch onto the back of them, see how long that can last. And it looked like it just worked, because towards the end, I was being caught quite quickly, but I just managed to stay out in front.
Oh, definitely, and that was visible. And just coming on to that dynamic of letting the pro drivers through, were there any particular areas on the circuit where you felt as though you could let them through and gain from being in the toe of them? Because slipstream's so important here at Daytona.
It is. To be honest, I just tried to play it wherever. I knew I could stay behind them in the infield. So almost if I could let them pass the infield and then just latch on when I get to the banking, that's sort of what I try to do. But it doesn't always work out that way.
Oh, indeed. And, well, with it not working out quite necessarily as planned in some of those situations, could you feel towards the end of the race with Callum Reed-Garton gradually closing up to you, was it a sort of growing pressure in your mind, or were you thinking sort of with 5 laps to go, or say 5 minutes to go, no, I've got this one in the bag, I can just take my foot off a little bit?
No, I was thinking, just don't look back too much. Hit your lines. I know I can't go any faster, so there's no point in seeing how far your back is. And then I think luckily he got caught up by a pro or two. He was probably faster than them, so that helped me out a little bit.
Oh, definitely. He did get caught up in the mix with some pros, then had to try and navigate his way through, but to his detriment, it was to your gain. And looking forward to Sebring in a week's time, another American circuit, a very different one from Daytona. How are you feeling for round 2?
Yeah, I think Sebring is probably another one where just survive the start, then he'll do well. It's a circuit I enjoy, but yeah, as Daytona, T1 can be a bit dangerous.
Oh, well, we'll look forward to seeing you navigating the circuit in a week's time and seeing what results you can pull off. But until then, congratulations on the win in the feature, and we look forward to seeing you in a week's time.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thanks for all the work you guys put on. And if I could just say thanks to Paul King and the NXTGEN boys, who really makes racing fun for us.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear. And I'm sure Paul will be listening. If not now, then definitely a little bit later tonight or tomorrow, and he'll be very pleased to hear that.
Thanks, Paul.
We're hearing there from Jaco Boshoff, who very happy with that result in the feature race and mastering the art of just simply racing to his own pace and racing against his class, not having to race against the pros and letting them through at the right time. And didn't always work out, as you were saying there, didn't always let them through at the right time and cost him some time. But in the end, he was able to navigate that hazard and as a result, pull off a fantastic win. And now let's come to our AM winner, and that is, of course, George Bland. As we just get George in the interview room. Hello, George, can you hear me?
Hi, Paul, come.
George, seeing you back on the top step in a feature race. It's been a little while, but you finally made it back there in the season opening round. How's it feel to have taken the win in the AM class in the feature?
Thanks, yeah. It feels good to be back on top, especially in a different car. Bit different to what I'm used to in the McLaren, but definitely better different in a good way. Yeah, it's nice to be back on the top.
Well, it was a tough race for yourself, and you had to battle against quite a disadvantage versus Koopmans. Just take us through what was your opening strategy with the race, having started quite a way in the midfield, and it looked as though it was a very difficult opening lap for everyone, yourself included.
Oh, yeah, it was a bit chaotic at times. There was cars going here and everywhere. My main interest was to stay out of trouble. I think I managed it quite well. Picked up a hell of a lot of places in the first couple of laps. And once the kind of carnage had settled down, I just tried to keep it clean and just keep it pointing forward.
Oh, definitely. And keeping it pointing forward did work very well for yourself with regards to gaining the time. We do have to ask you, at one point, you did come up behind Håkon Grubstad, who was in the MP412. Were you perhaps thinking, well, why haven't I got fire coming out the back of my car?
Oh, yeah, certainly was. When we were together, it certainly made me miss the McLaren. But the Porsche is so much more friendly to drive. It's more forgiving. But I do miss that McLaren, I'll be honest.
I do, but coming back to the Porsche and commanding it to the win, were you, as you were chasing down Stefan Koopmans before he had his incident, which saw you take the lead of the AM class, was there any particular strategy you were looking to employ, or you were targeting closing him down by a particular lap until the unexpected happened?
Well, I knew I had a couple of fast pros coming up behind me, so my main interest was to save fuel for a few laps, let them pass, and then try and stay into their tow to pull me through to catch up, which would hopefully allow an opening when they come through as well. So, yeah, that was the plan, but obviously it didn't end up happening.
Oh, indeed. But whilst it didn't happen that way, in the end, brought home the win. And now looking forward to Sebring in a week's time. Another American circuit, but a rather different one compared to Daytona. How are you feeling for round 2?
Yeah, feeling all right. Like you say, the track's a complete different kettle of fish to Daytona. Not really practice it that much, I'll be honest, compared to Daytona. But we'll see how it goes. I do like the circuit though.
Well, until a week's time when we look forward to seeing you take to the circuit once again, congratulations on the win, and we look forward to having you once more on circuit.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that.
Hearing there from George Bland, our winner in the AM class for the feature race. They're very happy to be back on the top step, and indeed quite happy to have made the car switch by the sounds of things in terms of a more forgiving car in the form of the Porsche 911 and making it work. And whilst in the end he did inherit the lead from Stefan Koopmans making that mistake at turn 1, he still did have a strategy in play, and as he was saying there, the idea of letting the pros who were coming through behind him essentially act as tow magnets or pull him along on the slipstream to try and gain time on Koopmans, because eventually they would come past the leader of the AM class and they would cost Koopmans time. But in the end, it wasn't to work out that way with Bland, and in the end, he could just take the lead and run away with it. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our post-race interviews for the feature race and our show for this evening. So if you want to know more about the Next Gen Racing community, why not check us out at our official Next Gen Racing website, that's nextgenracing.co.uk, or our Facebook group, that's facebook.com/groups/Next Gen Racing. Also, a big thank you to our partners without whom this would not be possible. Our partner for Lobby 1, of course, Apex Racing Academy, or ARA, and you can see their web address there. And also, just like to take a moment to apologise for the technical issues which did plague the opening of both races today. We are going to continue to investigate those technical issues. We have narrowed down one of the source of them. We've narrowed down the second source thanks to running the stream tonight. Unfortunately, these technical issues do come up. But that was Lobby 1's season opener. And until next time, it's going to be the case that our drivers will now need to put in a lot of practice for a very different American circuit. That's Sebring, round number 2 on Wednesday, the 24th of November, 2021. And when we say different, as you can see from the pictures here, a reference lap provided to us by Reese Carroll, another one of our pro drivers here, who will get the onboard of in a week's time. We'll bring you the onboard and that tour of the circuit in his Lamborghini Huracan, but you can see already how the circuit has some very wide aspects to it as he crosses the timeline here, but it's also a very narrow circuit through certain corners, and none more so than the midpoint of the circuit, and also some dangerous corners to navigate, such as the open left-hander of turn 1, where you go from a very wide circuit to a very narrow one, as we're seeing here. And I think this circuit, much like Daytona, could throw up a number of potential incidents, but also major opportunities for drivers to score points at the detriment of others, as it is a narrow circuit through the midpoint, and that means overtaking comes at a premium. And also when it goes to the wider sections, especially towards the end of the lap as well, there's going to be some major slipstream battles and overtaking opportunities into heavy braking zones. But more on that in the near future, ladies and gentlemen. We'll have to wait for the time being. I have to wait a week, but come back on Wednesday the 24th of November for round 2 of season 2 of the Next Gen Racing GT3 iRacing Championship. But until then, it is goodbye from me. I have been your host, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain of Spit, or also known as Britain of Spit, I should say. And until next time, from all of us at Next Gen Racing, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.